Good evening. Welcome to the RSU 5 Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, June 10th, 2020, and looks like we have a full Zoom house this evening, which is great to see. We have two board members I'm not seeing on yet. Oh, no, I just see Kate, so I think we're only missing Candy, so hopefully she'll hop on shortly. But we will get started in the meantime, and we will start with our calling the meeting to order. So pursuant to subsection 403A of 1 MRSA, we'll now confirm that each member of the RSU 5 Board of Directors can both hear and be heard. We'll do this by calling the roll, and members present are asked to say yes. We ask all other members to listen and report any audio difficulties when the roll call is complete. Kate?
Yes.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Candy? In case I missed her on one of the screens. Okay, we'll keep an eye out for Candy. Lindsay?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Susanna?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Maura?
Yes.
Vali?
Yes.
Maddie?
Yes.
And I'm not sure if we have our student rep on or not. Tonight is Rhea's evening. And
Yes.
Vali?
Yes.
Maddie?
Yes.
Okay, is anybody else hear the roll call we just did in the background? Or not? Tonight is Rhea's evening.
Yes.
Vali?
Yes.
Maddie?
Yes.
Okay, is anybody else hear the roll call we just did in the background? Or not? Tonight is Rhea's evening.
I would guess it's Diane Whitmore replay there. So go to mute, please, if you can.
Thank you, tech support.
That's what I do.
All right. I don't hear it now, so maybe it was just a delay of somebody watching it and being live on the call. So sorry about that. Rhea, I don't think is on because she's now a graduate, so she probably is off to bigger and better things today. And we didn't hear if Liam was going to be on, so we'll keep an eye out for them. But I think that's it for this evening for the board. Hopefully Candy will be joining us. So now
I've just joined by phone. Something's wrong with my computer.
Okay, good to know you're on the phone. Thanks, Candy. So now we'll just confirm that members of the public that are remotely attending the meeting proceedings are able to hear all the members. So if we could just have a member of the public unmute themselves for a moment and let us know that they were able to hear the board members' roll call and there weren't any audio issues other than what we've already hopefully taken care of.
Yes, that was fine.
Great, thank you. Okay, so since we have quite a few additional folks on the call this evening, we'll just do a quick run through of how we have been running these meetings. We ask that all folks keep their computer or their phone on mute during the meeting. We will have two opportunities for public comment in this evening's meeting. One is at the start, number 7 on the agenda, public comment. And then we'll have another at the end, number 15 on the agenda. And how we generally will run this is if folks are familiar with Zoom, if you click on the participants down the bottom of your screen, it'll bring up a participant pane on the right side. And at the bottom of that, you'll see a little blue raised hand. So that's how we identify folks that would like to be recognized to speak at the meeting. So during public comment, if you had something you'd like to share, we just ask that you raise your hand and we'll call on folks in the order that hands are raised to the best of our abilities. Jenny's pretty good at keeping track there. So that is how we will have folks join the proceedings. All right, so we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States
States
of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For all.
Or omissions? Let me see any board members want to make a motion or a second? Is that a motion, Beth, or are you just fixing your computer? Okay, Valley and Susan.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Okay, so just so you're aware of what we're going to do, I'm going to do it a little bit different, the roll call this evening. I had been asked about the order. We have done them alphabetically, but that has left someone always voting first or always voting last. When we do it in person, it's sort of simultaneous. And I confirm that there isn't any required way to do it, so we'll just rotate it down each time. So Kate was the first one to vote on the first last time, so we'll start this round with Jeremy.
Yes.
This is voting on the minutes.
Yep.
Candy.
Yes.
Lindsay.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
Susanna.
Yes.
Beth.
Yes.
Maura.
Yes.
I vote yes. Vali.
Yes.
Maddie.
Yes.
And Kate.
Yes.
The other suggestion from a regional school board meeting that I received was from MSBA. It was around consent agendas, since this roll call vote does seem to take quite a bit more time in our meetings than just our standard yay or nay in the meeting. So that's something we might consider depending on the duration of how long we're doing these calls via Zoom, but just an FYI. All right, so adjustments to the agenda, Dr. Foley?
Yes, I have two. I want to add a 13C, which will be a board discussion on inclusion. And then I'd like to also add a 14C for the hiring of a 0.5 English teacher at Freeport High School.
Okay, thank you. Good news and recognition. We will be recognizing our retirees this evening. This is all of these meetings are every time there's something new about having to do them, and this is a new one, right? Because we haven't had to do this yet. But I will turn it over to Dr. Foley.
Okay, so we are very honored tonight to have 7 retirees at the end of the year, and we would like to recognize them tonight. And we're going to try something. This is a new technology thing we're trying in the moment, and the administrator will speak a few words about the honoree. And as they're speaking, you will see the person that we're honoring. And I'm sorry that we're not here all together. We usually love to have some cake and punch and just have it a little more festive, but you know, it's the year of Corona, so we're making do this way. I think almost all of the gifts have been delivered previously, and so we just want to hear from the administrators, and we're going to have Moore Street up first. So Julie Nickerson will be speaking about Ann Bishop.
Great, thank you. So Anne is retiring after 28 years at Moore Street School, and she started her working life as an artist and came to teaching as a second career, bringing her artistic flair with her. During her years at Moore Street School, she has taught kindergarten first and settled for most of her years in second grade. No matter the grade, she's always been in the same room. And over the years, Anne has taken on leadership roles in literacy curriculum planning and development with a particular interest in writing, as well as being a member of the school leadership team. She's always been one to take on new initiatives with sleeves rolled up and 2 feet in. Anne, together with her second grade colleagues, were among the first to be trained in responsive classroom, and with the team's investment was a key factor in a successful school-wide implementation. Her high level of commitment, together with her insights, are always valuable, and she is constantly thinking about students and what would benefit them most. She asks for feedback as she seeks to push herself to continue learning and improve her practice. She's self-reflective, and at the end of one of the more challenging years, Anne came to me and said, "This year turned around when I realized all these kids really needed from me was love. And when I started to think that way, things changed for the better." Anne truly lives with the question, is it right for kids, at the forefront of everything she does. Anne is fondly considered the dancing queen at Moore Street. She loves to dance and brings that joy to her students with regular dance breaks throughout the day. Students may enter Anne's class a little hesitant to join in, but by the time they leave, they are busting out the moves along with everyone else. She's never shy to share her opinion, to the point where she is self-nominated and appointed herself as my assistant principal, and now rarely starts a one-on-one conversation with me without saying, "in my role as AP." Anne is never afraid of having hard conversations when necessary and approaches the dialogue with respect and an open mind. Anne is an incredibly supportive colleague, and she seeks out personal connections and makes sure she checks in and always brightens any day with an all-consuming hug. She's going to be missed terribly by our team, and we wish her well as she moves to South Carolina to enjoy her well-earned retirement.
Hi.
Okay. And now Julie will, unless, Anne, do you have anything you want to say? Justice, yes.
Say hi, Miss Bishop. Hi, Miss Bishop.
I want to say that it has been an honor to work for Moore Street School and RSU 5 for 28 years. It's bittersweet for me to be leaving. I actually cried in my truck today during the second grade parade through the town to hand out our gifts to the second grade students, because it just hit me as we were driving through the town that this was my last real interaction with the kids. And it has also been an honor to work for such an amazing principal, Julie Nickerson, and I thank her very much. And also you, Dr. Foley, I have found extremely supportive. And you've always come to our second grade talks whenever we've done a community, so thank you very much. And so, yeah, that's all I want to say, so thank you. And I'm gonna sign off. And thank you for delivering my gift yesterday. Very, very sweet.
Well, thank you, Anne, for your years of service, and good luck with your move, and we wish you the best.
Thank you.
And now Julie will, our next honoree is Becky Billings. Hi, Becky. And Julie, would you like to say a few words about Becky?
I would. So Becky is retiring after 40 years at Moore Street, and she'll be taking with her a wealth of knowledge and understanding of early childhood development. She started in 1980 as a speech and language therapist, and she would provide service to children in their homes and didn't have a classroom at Moore Street until an extension had been built. And at that time, she was running a small preschool to support a maximum of 12 students with special educational needs. Over the years, Becky has been a strong advocate for her students and her program, as budgets have been tight and cuts considered. Each time she has had to fight to keep her program, she had the support of her colleagues and parents who saw the value in the work that Becky was doing for the community's youngest children. Becky held the dual role of speech therapist and preschool teacher until the expansion of our pre-K program to what we have today. And at that transition, she was asked whether she wanted to be pre-K teacher or speech therapist, as the model no longer allowed for the time needed to do both. She responded by saying, "I choose pre-K because that is where my heart is." Never has anything been truer. Becky truly loves her work and cares deeply about her students and their families. Becky is well respected by her colleagues and parents alike. Many families over the years have returned to Moore Street, ensuring that second and third children get the same strong start with Becky as firsts. In some cases, it's the starts the parents had themselves. Becky's classroom is always a place of joy and full of glitter. It's a place where students are encouraged to be curious and explore new things. And when conflict arises, she guides her students to always listen to their heart so that they can be a kind and thoughtful friend to others. It's Becky's turn now to listen to her own heart as she is leaving us to support her own family and will be welcoming her first grandchild in the fall. It has been a privilege to work with Becky. She has big shoes to fill, and we will certainly miss her at Moore Street and wish her well in her new role.
Congratulations, Becky, on your retirement. Would you like to say anything?
Sure. I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity to do the best job in the world. And now I need to say goodbye before I just blubber. But thank you. It has been an honor, and I will miss it terribly. But I plan to sub. So.
Oh, great. Right. Well, we need you. We need you. So it's great to hear you're going to be around and just in a different role and also support your family at the same time. So
indeed. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you
congratulations.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so I think now we're moving on to Mass Landing. And Emily, would you say a few words about Lori and Allen? And I think that Lori is unable to be with us tonight, but we would still like to hear what you have to say.
And as I'm a mom of a Mrs. Billings kiddo, of course, I'm like all choked up going into my next step. So when I enter Lori's room, I'm always greeted by the buzz of engagement. Typically, Lori will be gathered on the carpet. She'll have a small group of kids gathered around her, giving them some responsive, personalized instruction. Typically, there are some students curled up on chairs around the room, noses deep in the books that they've pulled from her unreal classroom library. And more often than not, a student or two will want to eagerly tell me what they are working on, eager to share their learning. Collectively, these are all the things that reflect Lori's deepest strengths as an educator: her passion for literacy, her investment in kids as individuals, her ability to meet kids always where they are and think about pushing them to the next level of learning, and her respect for the voice of kids as 9 and 10-year-olds. Simply put, Lori loves her work and loves her kids. Even when students are less than their best, she demonstrates care for them and always has an appreciation for the ways in which they grow over the days, weeks, and months of the school year. She readily reflects on the way in which each student grows academically, but also socially and emotionally, and perhaps no time more than in the last 3 months. This growth is facilitated in part because Lori always creates a space for students' voices to have room in her classroom in their school community. 2 examples come to mind to illustrate this. One is this year, Lori was instrumental in creating a process for 4th graders to write and propose bills to their 4th grade peers as a way for them to make important changes in the school. And she was an advocate for this student-led decision-making process. Similarly, she collaborated with her 4th grade colleagues to create an opportunity for students to engage in what they called passion challenges, which was a project that created the space for students to pursue an area of interest. She is always committed to creating the space for students' voice and interest in her classroom.
So we wish Lori well. And now, Emily, would you say a few words about Becky Christie? Did Emily freeze? Oh, well, we'll give Emily just a second to maybe get back on. Hi, Becky. And if Emily doesn't, then what we'll do is just skip over you for a moment, Becky, and then come back to you. So Does anybody see Emily on?
Oh,
Uh-oh.
can you hear me?
We can hear you, Emily.
Did you hear what I said? Or I got booted off at some point, but it relogged on.
So I just said that we wish Lori well, and now you'll say a few words about Becky Christie.
Hi, Becky. So good to see you.
Mhm.
So Becky, certainly no teacher who's retiring this year had any desire to finish up their teaching career amidst the throes of remote learning. However, the way in which Becky has finished her career this spring, things like finding creative solutions to problems, sharing individualized feedback with students on their work, finding ways to celebrate student work through online learning platforms, and using art as a forum for community building through a collaboration of a student design t-shirt, which kids will receive on Friday. All of these things exemplify Becky's strength as an educator for the past 35 years, 21 of which have been at Mass Landing. Not surprisingly, as an art teacher, Becky brings a deep level of creativity to her work and to the school community. What to me is most notable, though, is her deep commitment to fostering a community that cultivates this creativity. When Becky started at Mass Landing in 1999, she collaborated with our former music teacher, Lise Dunn,
Blocked anyways.
to write, direct, and produce musicals. The two of them invested countless hours over the summer to write the script and the songs for these productions, and then collaborated with students to bring them to life. And her passion for the arts and their integration into the school setting just filled those students and staff who collaborated with her on these projects, filled them with creativity. Becky exemplifies the qualities of a reflective practitioner and perpetual learner. Despite her immense experience, she's often a resource for our new teachers. Despite that immense experience, she always is looking for ways to refine her practice to best meet the needs of her students. Over 3 decades into her career, she utilized the responsive classroom framework to continue to adopt new practices and continue to create a joyful and engaging classroom in the art space. Perhaps Becky's deep commitment to her own learning and growth is reflective of her value in process over product in the art classroom. One only needs to watch her guide students working with the forgiving medium of clay to appreciate the way in which she guides each student in their own development, no matter where their starting point is. She is truly a fixture of the Mass Landing community, and she will be dearly missed, but she has very clearly earned her first September sitting by the lake without a specific time to get up, enjoying a cup of coffee while sitting on the dock. So we wish her the very best for a lovely retirement, and of course would always welcome her back for a visit, but this time is well earned. Thanks, Becky, for all you've done.
Thanks, Emily, for those very kind words. And it has been truly a joy to be at Mass Landing. It's a wonderful place, and the district is a wonderful place. And when I first came here, a very wise person, Judy Higbee, some of you know, said, you should really change jobs every 7 years. But she said, when I got here, I just couldn't. And I feel totally the same way. I arrived at Mass Landing and I stayed. So it has been a deep pleasure. And just on a little lighter note, Dr. Foley, I think now you're going to be the only Becky in the district.
Well, we'll have to rectify that somehow. We'll have to get you back to sub. And I have to say, you have beautiful gardens at your house. So your art spreads beyond the indoors, but also to the outdoors. So I was inspired when I dropped off your gift. So thank you for that and for your many years of service.
Thank you.
All right, Ray, next up, we will hear from Ray Grogan about Janice Murphy.
Okay. This is really easy for me to talk about Janice and how wonderful she's been here at Freeport Middle School. Janice got here 20 years ago. All right, Janice got here 20 years ago at Freeport Middle School. She has incredible content knowledge and instructional methods for middle school students. She does a great job working with students individually to help them become better writers. She has half the instructional ELA time as the K through 7 teachers, but her test scores on the NWEAs are always at the top. She does a great job of maximizing her instructional time she has with students. She was the founder of our 30s project at Freeport Middle School, along with another teacher, which has really become quite an amazing tradition here. She's done great with project-based learning and helped lead that on the 8th grade team. She is our 8th grade team leader and part of our leadership team. Her leadership in our building will be deeply missed. Janice is a wealth of knowledge around literacy, and more importantly, her ability and knowledge to connect with our struggling learners. JMG dedicates their closing ceremonies to one teacher each year. Janice has received this honor more than the rest of the building combined. This speaks to Janice's connections with our students who need the connections the most. Janice is finishing a remarkable education career. She has taught at all levels, kindergarten through 8th grade, as a teacher and an administrator. She has worked in affluent communities and economically disadvantaged communities and been equally effective in both. She has multiple educational degrees that has helped her develop this. All of these great experiences have made Janice, a great person and a great educator. And Janice has done a great job using technology to enhance the learning. She is very willing to take a risk with technology in her classroom. And this has really helped her transition to online learning very smoothly and still hold the students to a very high standard and work input and output through remote learning. Freeport Middle School and RSU5 have been very lucky to have Janice here with us over the last 20 years, and we will definitely miss her here deeply at Freeport Middle School. So Janice, who is sitting here with me right now, thank you very much, Janice, for everything you have done.
Well, it's been a gas. It's been phenomenally cool, amazing 20 of my 45 years here in Freeport. It is the best place I have ever taught. The kids, the teachers, the community. It is wonderful. It has been wonderful. I am so fortunate to have been able to connect with so many families and siblings and see returning moms and dads through the years come for conferences, and it's been a dream. It's been great, and it's a weird way to go out, but I'm going to say it's a heck of a way to go out, but I can't think of any other way than doing something kind of unusual. So Becky, I thank you. Ray, I cannot thank you enough for being just an amazing administrator. So I'm looking forward to my retirement.
Well, we wish you well, and we just really appreciate all you've done for the students of RSU5. So thank you, and good luck with your new adventures. Do you have any specific plans?
Well, I just acquired an 8-week-old Jack Russell puppy to go along with my 10-year-old. So Jack Russells are kind of like middle schoolers. And so I think I'm going to have something filling my life for the next couple of years that are going to be equally demanding and joyful and humorous and just energetic. So that's my plan. That's my project.
I love the plan. It sounds like a great transition plan.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ray, will you say a few words about Jeannie O'Brien? Hi.
I will. So I just talked about Janice, who was my son Brady's favorite teacher. And now I'm going to move on to my daughter Sadie's favorite teacher. And I feel very lucky to have worked with Jeannie my years here. Jeannie has taught for 28 years, all here at Freeport Middle School. Jeannie is an incredible science teacher. She is incredibly dedicated, who cares deeply about all kids learning. The 8th grade MEA scores are always near or at the top for science. She is the department head. She's been a great advocate for the department head, the science department here at Freeport Middle School, and she works very closely with Durham Middle School science teachers also. She really did a great job leading her department to dig deep into the MEA data to look at what we needed to do different to help improve our scores. And she was the leader with that, doing that with our Durham Middle School science teachers and the Freeport Middle School science teachers. Jeannie has a great blend in her instructions to meet the needs of all kids. She has done a very good job making sure the students at all levels have access to her science content. Her instruction is always available to the students at the level they need it at and be assessed at. Jeannie has been a part of our technology team for as long as I've been here. She is a leader of technology in our building and helping push all of us in our building to do more and better and improve our instruction with using technology. Jeannie's leadership will be deeply missed in our building. Jeannie has a wealth of knowledge around science instruction, but more importantly, the ability to connect with our most struggling learning. FMS and RSU 5 are truly going to miss her, and our 8th grade team is not going to be the same. So we truly will miss you a lot, Jeannie, and she is also here with me. So Jeannie, thank you very much for everything you have done to help make Freeport Middle School what it is. Thank you.
I need to echo what Janice had said, that this was the place to work at, that I've always been free to explore and to be able to go deeper in my science and allowed to work with all my kids. And it's just been a great place. And I really appreciate Ray allowing that to happen. And thank you very much, Mrs. Foley, for just being there and letting this happen for me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, we wish you well. And what are your post-teaching plans?
Well, I have lots of ideas, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
Okay.
I'm starting, we just have a new house and I'm working on my garden. So we're there starting that, but I plan on doing lots of different things, I think.
Well, we wish you well in all those new adventures, and thank you for your years of service and leadership.
Thank you.
Okay, and then last is Dennis Willett will be talking about Karen Sylvain.
Hi, Karen has been a bus driver since 1990. And I got to tell you, this woman is outstanding in her field. She knows buses back and front and everywhere in between. Bus driving is a difficult job. You know, you're up in the morning early, it's cold. You got to start your bus and get ready. Karen would, make sure her bus is started and safe and without exception. As a driver, you worry about every kid on your route. Well, I can tell you, I think Karen knows every kid on her route by first name, maybe last name. And I think some of those kids became her kids in a way. She has been the Pownell and RSU 5 bus trainer. She's trained many drivers over her life. She's even trained one driver that drives every day in Pownell and one spare driver now that we have. She's trained other drivers around to drive spare buses. Well, I worked closely with Karen when we first got the transportation software, and she worked with me on the routes. And we sat in my office and we went over each route, and we looked at these little dots on the computer in the software. And she said to me, that is not the right place for that dot right there. That kid does not live there. You need to move that dot. And it's like, Karen, didn't take me long to figure out that I just shut my mouth and moved the dot because she knows where the kids live, believe me. I believe in the 30 years that she has driven students that she has driven parents of some of the students that she has now. She makes the best chocolate chip cookies. I had to throw that in there at the bus meetings. We just love it when she brings her chocolate chip cookies. One good thing she told me recently is she's willing to drive and train her replacement for a little while. And that got me thinking, what's a little while after 30 years? Is that like a year, Karen? No, probably not. But I'm going to miss you. I know you're going to come back and drive and help out with field trips and cover some things when we need you. And I appreciate that. I will certainly miss you. I know the staff at the school will miss you. I know that the other drivers will miss you, and certainly your students will miss you. To you, Karen, we all say good luck, stay in touch, but most of all, have some fun in your retirement. You've really earned it. Thank you.
Karen, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. I've had a fun job over the last 30 years. It's been tough sometimes getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, but you know, you struggle through it and get going. And once you're out there on the road, everything's okay most of the time. I've had a few times where I've had to sit on the side of the road, wait for a sand truck. I've had a time when I called Dennis and said, I'm not doing my whole route because I'm not going to make it. And he says, you've got to do it. I said, I can guarantee you nobody will call because it's all kids in Pownell and they know when the bus doesn't show up, something's happened. And I think I was right on that deal. But anyways, I'm going to miss everybody that I've worked with, but I'm going to be around. Like I told Dennis, I'm going to be around. I'm not going away anytime too soon, except if I get a chance to travel someplace, then I'll be gone. But that's the only time that I won't be around. So I've enjoyed my opportunities here and I've had fun with the kids and I'm certainly going to miss it.
I'll miss you, Grammy.
Well, I know that the kids and the staff will miss you also, Karen, but we are so thrilled to hear that you're willing to sub a little.
Oh, yeah.
And so we wish you well in all your retirement adventures.
Thank you, Becky.
Okay, and I think that, did Valley want to say something?
Valley, did you put your hand up? Did you mean to put your hand up? Maybe not. Oh, no, it's still up. Maybe it was back.
I don't know what's going on. It's just raising the hand on its own. Don't pay any attention. I'm going to try to teach her not to raise the hand for me.
Okay. All right. So we are at 7 on our agenda. So this is our first public comment period. So we just asked, like like Valley just showed us how to raise your hand in the participant pane, the little blue hand. We just ask that you raise your hand. We'll call on folks in the order that hands go up. We asked, once you've been recognized, we asked that you just let us know your name, where you live, and try to keep comments to 3 minutes or less. And Ella Vertenton is our first hand up.
Hi, my name is Ella Vertenton and I'm from Freeport. I'm a sophomore at FHS and I'm here to address equity in our school district from a student's perspective. After having heard multiple stories from students of color at the Black Lives Matter March in Freeport on Sunday, many USR5 students, RSU5 students started engaging in a conversation about what isn't working in our district and what we can do to fix it. I understand that a few FHS students and alumni have already reached out to the board, administrators, and other educators in our district as well. We've all been sharing our ideas and working towards a common goal. We first have some questions we would like you to consider. To start, do faculty in the district attend bias training? If so, do they attend this training yearly? What does that look like? We're also curious about our history curriculum and how much of it incorporates Black and Indigenous histories. If those subjects are taught in RSU5 classrooms, are those classes mandatory or are they electives? I'm sure that you all have heard the action steps that the Maine Department of Education is taking to combat racism in education. And I'm here to ask that you follow suit with the Department of Education and send all RSU5 faculty to bias training. I will further ask if the student body gets a vote on changing our history curriculum so that all students get exposure to the important topics of Black and Indigenous histories. And separately, we will be going to the high school directly to discuss the use of racial slurs in the classroom. While reading books like To Kill a Mockingbird and Huckleberry Finn, the use of racial slurs have been spoken aloud for educational purpose without any sort of discussion or vote to see how people feel about that. Our priority is to see that the school district becomes far more inclusive And so we want to normalize conversations on race and make all of our students feel safe. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ella. The next hand I see up is Maya Dowling-Wolf.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Hi, my name is Maya Dowling-Wolf. I'm from Freeport. I graduated from Freeport High School last year. You may have read the letter that I wrote regarding my experiences as an Asian American in the Freeport school system. If you had not had a chance to read my letter, and if you wish to, and if it's okay, I can post the link in the Zoom chat if you are okay with that. I would first like to thank all the people who have taken the time to read my words and initiate a conversation with me or with others. That letter is probably the most vulnerable thing I've ever put into the world, and I've been met with nothing but kindness, support, and a promise to make change. I am excited to meet with Dr. Foley, members of the school board, Principal Golko, and former teachers of mine to initiate this change. I would like to echo Ella's sentiments. I hope you take the opportunity to read my letter if you haven't, and where I make suggestions on ways to improve the discussion and topics of race in the classroom. I have recently composed a survey intended to generate data around the education of race, justice, and inequality at Freeport High School specifically. The goal of my data collection is to understand the changes that need to be made to ensure a safe, inclusive, and diverse learning space for all. I will take all these accounts into consideration in future conversations. When I wrote this letter, I had the intent of just reaching my own community. However, I've been in contact with multiple teachers within the surrounding area. The assistant superintendent at RSU 40 has reached out to me asking my permission to share my writing with all her staff and the school board. My letter has even reached a US diplomat. I am humbled to know that others have taken the time to read my words and reflect. I just wanted to tell you that there are people watching what RSU 5 does next. We have the opportunity to lead by example, and I'm optimistic that RSU 5 will take this opportunity in stride.
Thank you, Maya. Victoria Winters, please.
Hello. I'm actually an alumni as well of 99, forever ago. And I'm also a mother of one child in high school and 2 kids that are heading to Mass Landing School. I'm also concerned about the information shared during the march on Sunday and additional information that I've gathered since then. We have our own experiences with Moore Street School, Freeport Middle School, and Freeport High School as well. Every time we've approached the school with an issue tied to ignorant and racist remarks, my children are biracial for those who don't already know, we've been met with empathy, but the response to it has always fallen flat from a parent's perspective. This tells me that it's not that the administrators and teachers don't care, it's that they don't have the tools to respond to these incidences properly when they occur. So I'd like to know also what some of the planned next steps are for RSU 5. And I'd also like to see in the response to some of the things that Maya and Diamond have said and some of the other students have come forward with, I really think where I've seen, at least from all the communication I've been copied on, where it's sort of fallen flat is there's no sense of ownership of failing the students of color, regardless of who says what has happened in some of these incidences. We all, I think, can agree that we're failing our students of color. Otherwise, they would not have all of these things to say. So I'm looking forward to kind of hearing a more direct response from Dr. Foley and Freeport High School addressing those concerns.
Thank you, Victoria. Ayana Hayton. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name.
Oh, it's okay. So I'd like to share a portion of a letter that I have shared the full version with FHS administration as well as Region 10 administration. So I'm Ayana Hatton, and I'm a Freeport High School 2020 graduate as well as a person who lives in Freeport. The Black Lives Matter movement and recent protests have taught me that silence about racism is violence toward the Black community and all communities of color. At the time when this incident occurred, I was not as informed about that. Today, I would like to share an experience as a student in the RSU 5 school system. On Thursday, February 6, 2020, I started my day at Region 10 Technical High School, where I attend the emergency medical technician class, which frequently works with the CNA class. Halfway through class on that day, the two groups transitioned into the room where we had beds and mannequins to practice our skills on. A whiteboard had descriptions of patients, including symptoms, ages, and for one of the patients, race. This patient was the one that I happened to be assigned to. The description for this patient stated that she was a 77-year-old Asian female. She had a complaint of chest pain and difficulty breathing. The teacher also included that English was the patient's second language. My two other group mates shouted that, quote unquote, she had corona after them having only read that she was 77 and Asian. The symptoms linked with COVID-19 had little correlation to the symptoms we had been given by the teacher, causing me to believe that her race was a leading factor in this decision. They had not taken the time to consider the other things that might have been causing her chest pain and difficulty breathing. Still, before making contact with the patient, they decided that they needed to investigate the fact that English was her second language. The CNA teacher was pretending to be the nurse leaving her shift, so we were to direct any questions about patients to her. Without even wondering to what degree the patient spoke English, my teammate asked the teacher if we could speak to the patient's family to find out where she had been traveling. They were so quick to assume that the patient spoke little to no English because it was her second language. After deciding to assess the patient myself, one of my teammates asked me if I could be an interpreter for the patient because I am part Asian. This comment was hurtful, naive, and overall racist. Because they were so concerned with her having COVID-19 with very few symptoms to prove their point, we missed things as a team that would be unacceptable to miss as EMTs and CNAs. The CNA teacher had spent previous classes speaking about the symptoms of COVID-19 and the importance of not connecting this to the Asian culture or China. On February 6, 2020, she did exactly what she had told us students not to do and led my team to believe that because this patient was Asian, she had COVID-19. The whole time, this teacher was there and observing the students. While she decided to play along with the situation and not step in, my teammates made racist jokes about Asians and COVID-19. At the time, I planned to speak to the teacher, but I feared that I would be treated differently by both her, my teacher, and my peers for calling what she did racist. Because of this, I left the matter untouched and proceeded with school the same. It is time for me to speak up about racist incidents that I and countless other people have experienced in the Freeport and RSU 5 school system. I'm requesting change. Teachers must go through bias training. Teachers must learn how to recognize racism and stop it. Teachers must be a safe place that students should not fear to talk to because of their racist actions. As you can see, the root of change lies in the administration, who have the power to help their teachers learn how to be actively anti-racist. This is not an attack on the administration. This is a call for change to help the people of color within our communities so people feel safe at Freeport school systems. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ayana. Okay, I don't see any other hands up at this time, so we will continue with our agenda of report from the superintendent.
So included in your packet is just the meeting schedule. So I just wanted to point that out for all the meetings next year. And then I just wanted to do a brief update on a few things. The nutrition program will continue to support its students and communities by extending its free student meal program through June 30th. We are awaiting guidance from the Maine Department of Education as to whether we will be able to continue the free student meals through the summer break. So we don't have a final answer on that yet, and we will notify parents and community members as soon as we have one. Also, please be advised that the Mass Landing School meal site will be closed on Friday, June 12th. Parents may pick up meals at Freeport Middle School, Durham Community School, and Pownell Elementary School from 7 to 11 a.m. or at Freeport High School from 7 to 11 a.m. or from 4 to 7. The RSU 5 advisory team for the reopening of school met yesterday for the first time. We had a couple of technology glitches, but other than that, it went really well. I'm also hosting a recap meeting immediately after the advisory team meeting for any stakeholders who are not on the advisory committee so that they can offer input or ask questions. There's just, the burning question is, what is September going to look like? And we just don't know that as of yet. The next meeting is on June 23rd, and the links to the meeting are on the website, I think under COVID-19. There's much to be done in the next 2 months in order for us to be ready for the August start date. And the state has not released its guidance around reopening, so we are moving forward with developing our own plan at the moment. On Monday morning, there were posters taped around the high school that questioned whether we are treating students from diverse backgrounds differently from our white students. By checking the cameras, we were able to identify the students. Principal Golko and Assistant Principal Mellon reached out to the students and had them in today to listen to their concerns. Additionally, they have reached out to FHS students, inviting them to a student forum to hear their concerns about race, equity, and inclusion at the high school. This meeting will take place next Wednesday and will be facilitated by a third party. I plan on attending that meeting to also hear the students' concerns. I've also had 2 alumni from FHS reach out, and I'm setting up meetings with each of them next week. And then I've also reached out to a couple of contacts to begin exploring the possibility of an equity audit in case the board wants to move in that direction. One possibility is an organization out of Washington, D.C. called the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium. They provide high quality technical assistance and professional learning opportunities to districts to improve policies and procedures, as well as student engagement. I know that some of the schools in Maine, I'm not sure specifically which ones, have used them. I've asked Assistant Superintendent Cynthia Alexander to contact this organization and others to see what an audit would entail and cost. She is our affirmative action officer. And so, I thought she would be a good one to get this started. The audit would be just a tool to kind of point us in the direction of where are our greatest needs and within the district with regard to equity and inclusion. This could be a way to build upon some of the work that we've previously started. And this is a long journey, right? This is not about one day of anti-bias training or one day of anything. It's something that would have to be, that needs to be systemic and needs to be done thoughtfully. In addition, I know that our English and social studies, after hearing from many of some of the students, high school teachers have begun the process of reviewing their curriculum to ensure that there's diversity in the curriculum with the readings as well as with the authors who are writing. And these are just a couple of initial steps that have begun in the past week. So we take the concerns that the students have put out there seriously. We want to hear what they have to say. And obviously, we want RSU 5 to be a place where everyone feels safe and welcome. So that's kind of our initial next steps there. Our 2020 graduation was, we feel like, a grand success. But a big thank you to the families and staff who helped make it to be such a memorable event. And a big shout out to Jen and Charlie, who worked through a million details to pull the evening off. And thankfully, the weather also cooperated beautifully. I just have a few budget updates. The ballots have been delivered to the 3 towns. The board will vote tonight on the warrants and to call a public meeting. Tomorrow, board members need to remember to come by any time between 7:30 and 11:30 to sign the warrants, because those warrants need to be delivered tomorrow to be posted in each of the 3 towns. The public hearing will be on June 24th via Zoom at 6:30 to receive comments and questions about the board adopted budget. Because of COVID-19, there has been an executive order that does not require the annual budget meeting. So there will only be this year for RSU 5, that vote on July 14th, and then there will be a board meeting on the votes on July 14th, and then we'll have the board meeting on July 15th to certify those votes. And then I'll be working with Candy in the next couple of days, because we really want to start publicizing the public hearing and the vote as much as possible. And then lastly, I have 2 resignations to report. Ann Cromer, Director of Finance and Human Resources. Her last day will be August 3rd, and we already have that position posted. And then also Lynette Larkin Silva, the nurse at Mass Landing School, and that will be effective at the end of the school year. And I believe that that concludes my report. Thank you.
I see Maddie's hand up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have 3, I hope, short questions. Thank you so much, Becky. First question, I did tune in as an observer to the reopening task force meeting yesterday, but I was distracted. So I'm just wondering if anyone brought up arts and the athletics, or if it wasn't raised, is there a plan to include that in the discussion about reopening in the fall?
That is part of the plan. That was not spoken about specifically yesterday. We reviewed the plan. So basically we're trying to put together 3 plans. One would be something similar to how we ended the school year, or will be ending the school year. And we're calling that the red level. And then on the green level, that would be as much back to normal, although we know it's not going to be exactly normal. And then the yellow is more of a hybrid. And in each of those plans, there is what I would call a box, or, that there's a separate plan for the arts as well as athletics in all 3 plans that will be worked on.
Okay. Just would request that to make sure that that's specifically looked at and the specific challenges around both of those extracurricular activities. My second question, you mentioned that there's going to be a third-party facilitator for the high school meeting next Wednesday with students, which I think is a great idea. If you've identified that person, are you able to tell us anything about who that's going to be and what they're bringing, what skills and background they're bringing to that role?
So we have not identified the person. We've just reached out to one person that I had a lead on, but I'd prefer not to mention that because it hasn't been solidified. But we feel like if that person doesn't work out, then we'll find somebody else. But we just felt like that might be a better opportunity for the administration to be able to hear while the discussion is being facilitated.
I think that's a great decision. My last question is about the votes for the budget. You had mentioned to us that would have to be a hand vote, and so I'm just wondering how that will work for people who are voting absentee.
So the vote. There are absentee ballots. So, and then there are paper ballots.
That's, I guess, what I meant. So for people who are voting absentee, will they get
I know.
Time so that they will get the school budget vote included in their regular absentee ballot?
Yes, and I just am realizing what you're really asking. What it is that it's going to have to be hand counted because the executive order came so late that, you know, once the attorneys were able to draft the questions, it was too late for us to get the machine counted ballots. So we delivered paper ballots that will have to be hand counted by all 3 towns. But yes, that will be right in the, you know, absentee ballot. If you're voting absentee, you're going to get the school budget ballot.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Valley.
Thank you, Becky, for that update. That was wonderful and very descriptive. Quick question on the reopening of schools committee. I've had questions from members of the public asking, in addition to what you said about giving feedback at the end of the meeting, if people are not able to join the meeting on in the time frame during which you guys meet, what other ways are there for people to contribute thoughts? And also, is there going to be a survey sent out to the community at large, meaning students and parents, to basically get their feedback that way, so people don't have to initiate and contact you, but you contact them and they tell you how it went?
Yes, there are plans for there are plans to survey the parents, and then the administrators are also contacting, you know, working with their school leadership teams too, so that we can get, you know, widespread input. As far as if you're not able to make the meeting and you wanted to offer, you know, feedback, I would say the easiest way would be just to email me, other than the survey that we will be putting out once it's created.
Mara.
So I'm really glad to hear that there'll be a facilitator at the student forum on Wednesday. I just wanted to express my concern over making sure all students have an opportunity to have their voices heard. And, you know, if perhaps there are students who wouldn't feel comfortable in that kind of forum, or maybe even speaking with administrators, that they could have a different opportunity. I'm not sure that would look like what that would look like. Maybe there'd be someone else, like a social worker or guidance counselor, they'd feel more comfortable speaking with, and just wanting to be sure we make an opportunity for those students as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Mara. Okay, so 9 administrator reports. Finance. Anne.
Hi, everyone. Just to give you an overview through May 31st of our budget of $34,080,295. Year to date through May, combined expenses and encumbrances total $27,299,737, which represents, that leaves a remaining $6,850,558. That represents about 20% of the budget, which compares, it's almost exactly what it was this time last year. So I think we're in good shape. I do see that some categories, some articles, the spending was lower. So we've seen savings in transportation and district administration and athletics. I'm sorry, not, yeah, but whereas we've had higher spending slightly in school administration, but overall the things even out and we're in a good spot.
Thank you, Anne.
Sure.
Okay, board comments and committee reports. The only one we have on here this evening identified is the board information exchange and agenda requests, or if you had a subcommittee that you wanted to share. Valley.
Nothing to share in terms of committee, but I just wanted to put a big shout out to Jen and Charlie and Ray. I have kids in those schools and all of them have done a fantastic job with an alternative way of graduating our kids. So thank you so much. Very enjoyable and very
Maura.
I echo that. Graduation was really wonderful. It was wonderful to attend. I wanted to follow up on a discussion that we had at our last meeting when we had looked at the facilities report from Dennis, and wanted to thank Dennis so much for all of his hard work on that. At that time, I didn't really feel, we ended up talking about the different options for Moore Street School, and I needed sort of further time to think about that. I wasn't really prepared or expecting that discussion to take place then. And I would like to ask the board to consider getting further information. So it could come in the form of a feasibility study or something like that, but I feel to evaluate the different options that we have moving forward, that I would need to have more information, and to do our due diligence as a board, I would think we should gather more information about possible options for Moore Street and for Pownell Elementary before we decide on any one option. So I guess that what I'm asking for is for the board to request that Becky or Dennis explore the cost of a feasibility study of different options for Moore Street and Pownell Elementary for us to gain more information.
Can I ask a question, Maura, on the feasibility of what? Expansion, renovation, more space, like what?
I guess any of the options that would be possible to address the increasing enrollment right at Moore Street School. So I know like Valley had presented a few options, but certainly there could be others aside from those. Exploring any feasible option, really. I'd be interested in seeing the benefits, like the pluses and minuses, and the cost benefit to pursuing different options before we decide just on one, because it kind of had seemed like we were headed toward the direction of just choosing one at the last meeting.
Vali.
Yeah, so what I recall from that meeting was that the decision was made to just follow through with expanding Moore Street School and building over Wing C. People expressed concern about the cost of feasibility studies, but I would be totally in favor with Maura's suggestion that at least we explore how much the feasibility studies cost before we rule out all the other options. I also still feel that it would be a better decision in the end if we look at all the options and not just pick one now that seems to be the most cost effective and most simple way to move forward, because it's a big decision. So if we could at least look at how much a feasibility studies would cost, then we'll have enough information to decide whether we just want to settle on one or whether we want to pursue even a couple. So I'd be in favor of doing that at the very least.
Okay. I guess my takeaway from that was I don't think any decision had been made about what to do with the Moore Street School. I think what I heard us asking was, given the climate, given the financial situation we're in, the likelihood that we could request, any of the larger costing potential scenarios would be difficult at this point. And the expansion at Moore Street is probably the most, I don't want to say cheapest, but from a financial standpoint, probably made the most sense, right? I guess, the idea around just getting some additional information on what that looks like. I didn't take away from our meeting that we had decided on anything as it relates to the enrollment issues. Like, I have a lot of questions around the enrollment numbers themselves and what's driving those things and where do we see those changing over time, because they do seem to vary. So, and we've had a variety of inputs that have been changing in terms of pre-K and those sort of things that were driving some of those numbers that may or may not continue at the trajectory that we've seen over the last few years, right? Because I think that's part of the concern is if they grow at the way they have been growing, then we have enrollment issues. But if they don't, then it's, we may not. So I mean, the idea of getting some information on a feasibility study, I think is probably a good one, just so we know what the options are. Should we come to the decision that it makes the most sense to move forward with expanding capacity somewhere. But it's interesting how we have different perspectives on the outcome of that last meeting. Valerie.
Yeah, so thank you for clarifying what you took home from what we spoke. So if no decision has been made yet, is there another placeholder in a future agenda to revisit this discussion? Because it's time sensitive. I mean, we're at capacity right now and possibly beyond capacity if a lot of kids sign up during the summer. So if we're going to assume that we didn't make any decisions last meeting, then I would like to know when we can have that discussion so we can actually make a decision. And during that discussion, possibly bring all information to the table that you and others may have that need to be considered.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have a spot, today on the agenda, or we have one more meeting before we break for the summer. So I'm not sure it would be before we came back. And I'm just cognizant of the capacity of folks to make sure that we're not overloading people in a time of, building 3 plans and dealing with a variety of other items. Certainly, I don't think it's something we want to fall behind on because it does take time. It takes years to get these projects moving. So, I would be open to a discussion around the feasibility. I don't know when we might be able to fit that in, though. Did you have your hand up, Becky, or did you put it back down?
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking that, we could do that at the retreat. That's one thing I think we have to also, even tonight, kind of the meeting on I'm going to get all my meetings now mixed up, the 24th is just a public hearing. And then we have the meeting on the 15th where you're certifying the votes. So I guess, I think typically that's a pretty short meeting, but, there is that. I think we're talking about the cost sharing tonight. And I think, we also need to discuss when you want to get the consultant in here. So I don't know. So my first initial thing is just, I guess I think about the retreat as being a time where we have a big chunk of time to kind of lay out the work and decide, have time to talk about it. Because I think as we would seek out that kind of study, I would think that they would need to know a little bit about what we were thinking. And I know when we talked about Pownell, this is my memory, about Pownell, I had said, one thing we could do in that kind of study is talk about reconfiguring the district, and there didn't seem to be a lot of energy for that. So I totally understand that, and I'm fine with that. But I would just need direction about, so what is the study for Pownell? Is it to put the community programs maybe out there, or I don't know. And I've never, I don't have experience with the feasibility study, so maybe they can just give us like, this is what it costs, no matter what you're requesting. I don't know how that works, but I would think it depends on what the question is as to what the cost is.
Okay. Okay, so I mean, unless people feel strongly that they feel like we need it before, August, I would, I guess, agree with Becky's suggestion that we include that on our agenda for the retreat. Okay, 11, policy review. Consideration and approval for the following policies. Cynthia.
Hi, good evening. These are both second read policies that you have before you tonight. And the only change to the first one was Valley's suggested change on I to just change it to approves program of studies. I can't even remember what we had there before, but I made the change that Valley had. And then with the second policy, IKF, graduation requirements, we did the bulk of the work on first read. And again, I think this was either, I'm not sure whose suggestion it was, maybe Michelle, maybe Bali, but if you'll notice in section A, the way it was laid out before, it was what was required under MRSA 4722. That was the first subsection, and it had the credits those 11 credits that were required, and then it was broken down into 127, and then that 1.5, and then everything else. And so the suggestion was, let's make it cleaner, and so people can just take a look at it and say, okay, these are the total number of credits that a student needs in the categories that they need to get them in. And so I just reworked that paragraph A and reflected that there. So that's change one. And then on page 4, section E, there was a question about how many credits could they get if they took a class or a course or more than one course as a middle schooler at the high school. And we followed up, Jen and I followed up with the guidance counselors, and they get 1 credit for each of the classes. So we made that clearer in the document, in the policy. And then on the last page, section H, the honors and awards at graduation, it was noticed that the summa cum laude with distinction was absent from the policy, and we added that in there. So those were the 3 changes that were made since the discussion from last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago. And that's it.
Thank you. Maddie.
Welcome.
Yes, Cynthia, on the graduation requirements, page 2 at the bottom of section A with the asterisk.
Yes.
You still have that typo we have to correct where it just says administrative. It should say administrative and world language teacher approval.
Okay, show me. Can you tell me again? I'm sorry.
So where the asterisk is at the bottom, may apply for a waiver.
Yeah.
In that second line, must have sound rationale, and then you just have the word administrative, but it
Yes.
should say administrative and
Thank you.
world language teacher approval.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. It should say that.
Susanna.
Thank you. On just a clarification on graduation requirements, page 1. And this didn't seem to be a conundrum for me last time, so I'm not quite sure if it just has to do with the modifications and rereading. But toward the bottom, right before the academic requirements for the diploma, says students must be enrolled in a minimum of the equivalent of 6 full credits. And then it says that students must complete a minimum of 20 full credits. And those numbers don't add up. And so are the 20 credits that are outlined on the next page?
Yes.
Because a minimum of 6 classes over 4 years, that should be 24 credits. And that's been changed to 20, but I'm just wondering if we're accounting for the additional 4.
I think that Jen Gulko, are you still? Yeah, I think Jen had explained that last meeting. Jen, you want to take that?
That might be why it made sense last meeting. And
So that could be that that is when we're saying at the high school that they have 8 potential blocks, 4 per day, that we want to ensure that they have 6 dedicated classes out of those 8. And so some of those might be a support class, like a learning lab or a math lab, some of which will count for credit and some will not. So that was how we were determining what we wanted them to take per year to be considered a full-time student.
Thank you.
So those labs, are those the integrated equivalents? Says credits or integrated equivalents?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Jen.
Hello. I wanted to just say something I noticed on page 5 of the last page of the policy, where it lists the different distinctions. It doesn't match the program that was at the graduation Monday night, the absolute greatest graduation. It was phenomenal. I can't say enough good things about it. But it's by a half a point.
Right.
So did we change that?
So Jen and I had this discussion, and Jen, you were going to change it. Is that correct, in the program of studies? I can't remember where we landed on this, Jen. Because, like, for example, it says 85, 89 instead of the 84.5. And remember, I talked to you about that. Are you with? Okay.
You mean versus, so this policy matches what's in the program of studies. What we did for the graduation is that an 84.5 would be rounded up to an 85. So it's anybody who falls into that category. So that was more for aesthetics.
Yeah, that I just worry. My fear of that is that if it's not rounded up, you get somebody who's very upset that they had an 84.5 and didn't get included. So if those are rounded up for the graduation, then that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need a motion.
Sorry, Vali. I think Vali's hand is up. I was muted. when I
Okay,
called.
sorry.
Sorry, one question. I would agree with Jen that if we can keep the program at graduation the same as the program of studies and this policy, it would be more consistent. Fewer questions. And I also wanted to ask whether you guys had the conversation about granting some recognition based on habits of work in addition to GPA.
So we have already granted, habits of work recognition from semester to semester. We have not had the chance to talk about whether we would recognize that at graduation or not. So that's specifically where that's tied to the habits of work recognition that we do on a semester basis. That's described in the program of studies under grading. But in terms of graduation, these numbers and these distinctions match what lots of colleges do and represent the stoles and the cords that the kids wear. But we have not had a chance to talk about whether we would want to do that for habits of work separately.
The reason why we had mentioned it last meeting was that there was a question that there may be too few students who receive no recognition. So this may be a way to include more students so that we don't have just a handful left out, which may be a little painful, but something to think about for the future. I mean, I'm not going to suggest that we change anything now, but it was part of the conversation. So I thought I'd ask.
Vali or Michelle, can I make a comment about that?
Yeah.
Okay, so Vali, we have another policy as well, transcripts and academic achievement, that addresses that habits of work. And that is a policy that we will be revisiting right at the beginning of next year. So I think we can address it through that. So it's policy IKC. Just wanted to let you know that, because it addresses habits of work in that policy.
And I would just add that the current the students that are coming up would be the first grade that would impact the cords. So that could be something that we talk about and the distinctions that they would have at graduation.
Okay, so do I have a motion for consideration and approval of the following policies, second read, BBA and IKF? I can't see everybody's hands, so. Oh, I saw Jen and Susanna. Thank you. All right. So we are going to start with Candy.
Yes.
Lindsay.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
Susanna.
Yes.
Beth.
Yes.
Mara.
Yes.
I vote yes. Vali.
Yes.
Maddie.
Yes.
Kate.
Yes.
And Jeremy.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Michelle, can I just also say, I'd like to say thanks to the board for your support, but also wanted to share that with the reduction of credits that the board approved, we had every single one of our students on our at-risk list graduate this year, which was wonderful. So it was great.
Well done. I know that's a lot of work for all of you guys and from you and the students. So good job to everybody for getting them across the finish line. It was a great evening at the Saco Drive-In. Okay, so unfinished business. We have 12A. We have the work of the cost sharing consultant. I don't know if Becky had anything to share about the individual or timing, or you just want us to provide some.
I think the board request was that you wanted to talk before I provide him any. Well, I think you wanted a meeting to talk about it before we had him come to a board meeting.
Yes.
So
Okay.
I have
So here we
nothing
are
to
to
present.
talk about. Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we had teed it up the way we were meeting the need of why we had it on our agenda.
Okay.
Okay, so there's just been some discussions about, what do we want to get out of having the consultant come in? What information are we looking to share with him ahead of time? Do we want to sort of lead that discussion with him, or just let him come to us with some ideas and then we can provide feedback? What's the pleasure of the board? Vali.
Since I'm the one who requested we talk about it before the consultant comes, the reason why I did request that we have this time ourselves without the consultant was I thought it would be wise to basically define what result we would want from a formula that this person would design based on his prior knowledge of school finance. So I wanted basically to be able to give this person an idea of what we're after so that we don't have basically a myriad of choices that the person brings that we have to sift through, and possibly if he brings 10, we leave 9 out of the table when we could have done that ahead of time. So what I had in mind for way to move forward is not necessarily to give this person a prescriptive approach to what to use or how to use it, but give this person an idea of what we want the formula to do. And when we look at the current funding formula, there's some iniquities there that I would like to see corrected. If you refer back to that handout that was given out by the Finance Committee on November 6th, 2019, there's a table on the front page, which is labeled RSU 5 Education Costs for Median Homeowner by Town. And if you go to the column that describes median home education tax, you will see that Durham, the median home tax is $2,600 and change. Freeport, $3,200 and change. Pownell, $2,500 and change. So that's the education tax for the median home in each of the 3 towns. If you move over to the next column, the one labeled median household income, you will see that the median household income for Durham is $73,500, for Freeport $79,500, and for Pownell $83,700. So when I look at those numbers, and having heard a lot of feedback from Freeport residents, especially now in light of COVID and all the financial impact that everything has had on the 3 towns, I just feel like it's really important that we address the inequity that the median home education tax in Freeport pays 25% more than Durham and 29% more in education tax than Pownell, even though the income for the median household in Freeport is right in the middle of that of Durham and Pownell. It just seems that something here is completely out of balance. And I would want the consultant to address those numbers to arrive by using any value variables that he wants to use, arrive at or construct a formula that results in the median home education tax for a taxpayer in any of the 3 towns being similar. So the burden on the taxpayer, regardless of where they live, if you're a median home resident, that you should have to pay a similar amount in education tax. So that's what I would want to see. I'm sure there are a million other ideas that people have, and I wanted to put that on the table to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Kate is next.
Hello. I just want to point out in the table that we're looking at right now, if everybody has it in front of them, that the reason the median home education tax is different in the 3 towns is because the home values are different in the 3 towns. To me, the more important number is the equalized number, which is the first column. Also, the median household income in this table was presented. This was an attempt to recreate a table that a fellow member had provided to the board prior to this meeting. But the more important value to me, or that you, not necessarily more important, but the one that you need to look at in conjunction with the median household income is listed in the footnote to this, which is the mean income by town. So in Durham, the mean income, the average, is about $85,000. There are margin of errors in all of these numbers, which if accounted for, it's pretty significant. There's also margin of error in the median household income. But I'm just going to list these off and just take them at face value. But Durham's is $85,000 for the mean income. Freeport is $111,000, and Pownell's is $94,000.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Jen.
I remember when we were having this discussion way back, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that household income is not used in any formula, if I'm correct, in any other, school system. And that home value was always the leading factor. And I just, for my personal opinion, is I'm extremely uncomfortable using income as any kind of factor in our cost sharing. I think that's a really, it varies so much. I just feel very uncomfortable. I don't think it's something, I don't think we want to go down that path. I think that would further, put a further kind of, I don't know, between all the 3 towns. I think that's just not a not the good way to go. So I would not vote to put anything to do with income into this.
Thank you. Vali.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, I'm not suggesting that we use income in the formula itself. I'm just referring to the income to express the ability to pay for the median home in each of the 3 towns. And what I'm saying is that someone with an income that is lower than Pownell, for example, which is the Freeport resident, ends up paying $1,000 more in education tax, which is almost 30% more. So I'm not at all suggesting that we use the income to calculate how much we each contribute. I'm just saying that if we have people who have who live in homes that are widely different in terms of how much they're valued, but they don't have the money to pay for higher taxes, we shouldn't ask that. We shouldn't ask that people do that. If the correlation between the valuation of the homes and the income for the people residing on those homes were parallel, then that would make total sense. But when you look at the education tax per 200,000 valuation, and then you look at the income, you realize that people with similar or lesser incomes in Freeport live in homes that are valued a lot higher, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can afford to pay a lot higher taxes. So what we're saying is that the Freeport resident who has a much higher education tax may have to sell that house because they can't afford the taxes, because the taxes are higher. And yes, when they sell a house, they will make a lot more money because the value of the home is higher. But while they reside in that town and they pay for education taxes, they're not making any more money than the people in the other 2 towns, but they're asked to pay much higher taxes for education. So it's just a point of reference to give context to use the median household income. It's not a suggestion that that be included as a variable in the formula at all.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
If it's brought up and used as a point of reference, then it goes into the thought process of the formula. So I guess I'll further say that I am uncomfortable with the income being addressed at all in the discussion. When you just pointed out about, a home in Freeport, being, them paying more taxes than a home in Durham, but they could have the same income. That is not an issue, in my opinion, that comes into deciding. I mean, maybe I'm the only one who thinks this, but a decision to buy a home in Freeport is a personal decision, and it is not something that I feel like we should tie in with this discussion. I mean, I guess it's important to hear what everyone thinks about that, but I'm completely against that.
Thanks, Jen. Beth.
Hi, I just had a question about the actual numbers on the table. I felt like as I was listening to Vale, she was saying different numbers than what is on this table. And I just want to confirm we're talking about like what's been called the fairness memo, correct? And it's like on page 3. Is that right?
Yes, and I was just looking at the link. I know there was one that we had adjusted, and I don't know if the one I pulled up is the one that was adjusted versus the one like if I clicked on the link that you provided, Kate, right? That brings us to the website, and there was one that said like click here for the handouts provided at the meeting. So that would be the updated one, right?
The updated one was the original one was given in November of 2019, and then the updated one is listed along with the February 12th, 2020 meeting. And it says update from November handout.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
It's
so you,
the most
I was
recent.
looking at the November one because I thought that's the one that she was referencing. So I was very confused about that. All right. I guess so. Just quickly, can you tell me what was updated about it? Like what actually went into it that changed?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
You want me to address that, Michelle?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, let me bring it up again. I went back to make sure I was telling you the correct link. Okay. The median assessed home value is what changed in the table. Because I went back and I reached out to the assessors in each town and asked for actual data. Whereas I think the November handout was based on this, was it census?
Census, maybe.
I think it might have been census data.
Okay.
So you see the footnote A says that it was provided by each town's assessor for the 2019-20 tax year. And I think if you looked at November's version, it said it referenced the census or something.
Okay. Okay. Now that I have that straight and I'm actually looking at the right numbers, thank you. I do still have a question. Whereas Valley is referencing what the median home education tax is and the variations there, but there's less variation in the education tax per the 200,000 valuation. So I'm just wondering, are we okay? I guess that's just I'm kind of figuring it out as I go. I'm sorry. Like, yeah, realizing the different columns you know, are referencing different things. And so it was just hard to follow when she was giving all the numbers. So sorry about that.
Yeah, if you want me to give a quick explanation of the columns, I can. The education tax per 200,000 valuation is taking the education mill rate from each town and multiplying it by the 200,000.
Right, okay.
The next column over, we just talked about, that's the median assessed home value that I got from each assessor. Then the next one, that's the education tax, taking the education mill rate, which is the same mill rate used in the first column, but you're multiplying it by the median assessed home value from the second column. And that gives you that number.
Okay.
So instead of multiplying by the 200,000, I'm multiplying it by the 182.4, the 310.7, and the 224.2.
Gotcha. Okay, that helps. Thank you very much.
Jeremy or Kate, did you have a question other than answering Beth's?
I was just going to add on to what Jen had said earlier, and I was thinking the same thing, is that person's income, they're making a personal choice on where to buy a home and where to live, and whether or not someone who makes less than someone in Pownell chooses to buy a home in Freeport instead of Pownell. That's one of those decisions that goes into buying a home. And I don't think it's something that should be a factor in how we set up the formula.
Jeremy.
Yeah, I also agree that you know, home value in my mind is the best and fairest metric we have available to help, you know, set what is fair in terms of payment and taxes for the schools. There's no like perfect answer because there's always going to be 1,000 different permutations of choices that people make, and I think that's very likely why our school tax system in Maine and really lots of places in the country is based on home valuation. You know, and that's why I liked where, yes, some of the proposals that the finance committee had that we had around, you know, property value with a mixture mixture of student population too. You know, those metrics put together seem to land at what I thought was the fairest. So what I'm hoping to hear, you know, from the consultant is, are there different perspectives or, you know, common practices that they've seen in other RSUs or other consolidated districts in Maine, and just kind of a different perspective, you know, because you can get in a bubble to an extent, and you know, see if we, you know, missed something, which is entirely possible as part of these discussions.
Thank you, Jeremy. Vali.
Yeah, my response to that would be that valuation, when the valuation of the 3 towns or however many towns participate in a consolidated district, makes sense when there are the disparities that we have in our 3 districts. Freeport as a town that has coastal, but very few coastal properties, as a valuation that reflects partly those properties that are inhabited by, you know, very few people in town. By the same token, we have some commercial property that is valued very highly, and it raises the valuation of the town. That raises the value for everyone, including the people who are under poverty level and live in our town. And we have similar rates of poverty as the other 2 towns. So in a way, I think that looking at just valuation is penalizing all the people in the middle who have a median income and live in a median home in a town that has few properties that are very highly valued and that raise the overall valuation of the town. So in a way, there's some distortion going on when we look at the valuations of the 3 towns. And I think it's fair to bring that into the discussion and try to consider the impact of the education tax on the median person living in each of the towns, because that is basically the, you know, the bulk. When you look at the distribution of the valuations of the properties, the bulk of residents are within the median, and they are the ones who would pay the penalty for living in a house that happens to be in a district that has waterfront property. And those people may have been there for a long time. They may not have made the choice recently to buy a home into that town. They may have been residents here for a long time. Their incomes haven't increased, but the valuations have. So basically we're saying we're pushing those people out because they no longer can afford the taxes. I mean, that's what people want to do, then I disagree with it. I just want to point out the fact that people in this town do not make, the median household in this town, Freeport, does not make more money or cannot afford higher taxes than people in the other 2 towns. So it's just something to consider. Just an opinion. I hope that it will be taken into account.
Maddie, I think, was next.
I'm not sure that we're ever going to find any kind of consensus on this board about what numbers we should look at. I think that's why we've been around this and why we put it off for so long. And when I first suggested the consultant, it was in part to take the heavy lift off the finance committee, but also to bring somebody in, an expert whose numbers we could trust and not second guess. It's just hard to argue the very complex reasons why and why not these numbers should or should not be used. So I'm looking for a savior, I guess, which I know is a big ask, but I'm wondering if it would be worth his while. We're saying his, I'm assuming that's because we have hired this person and he is in fact a he.
Correct.
Okay, good. To first thing, sit down with each of the finance directors of each of the 3 communities so that he can hear directly from the communities instead of it getting filtered through representative board members' understanding of what they may be hearing from their towns. I just think that might be a good first step, and might help him decide which numbers work best. And that's my non-mathematical request.
Beth.
So when I'm looking at this table again, and I'm looking at the first column where the education tax per $200,000 valuation, Freeport has the lowest. So I'm not sure where, this notion of Freeport having higher than anyone else, and I know that it gets higher if you have a more expensive home. Yes, it gets higher. But if you just look at that 200,000, then, Freeport is the lowest. So that was just something that, when I'm looking at everything and I'm hearing, from, Freeport and the town numbers that they've run and how the taxes are high and, all this stuff. But, I'm looking at this like, well, in comparison, it's not. And so for me, I think for the cost, for the consultant, I think I would, basically there were a lot of numbers being run, people doing their own formulas. Freeport had their numbers, Durham had their numbers, Pownell, I don't think they had any numbers, but and then the finance committee had their numbers. And so to me, I would like to just see from the non-biased person, which numbers, like what are the numbers we're talking about here, and how does it, in a way that all three towns can look at and say, well, this person doesn't have a stake in the game. This is what his professional opinion of these numbers are, and, and then almost have that as a jumping off point, I guess. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Beth. Kate.
I like what both Beth and Maddie had to say, because I think they're right. I mean, it got confusing because there were multiple parties trying to develop their own tables, and it was conflicting at times with what the finance committee was coming up with. And it just was, it undercut anything that we were able to come up with. We just couldn't gain the board's trust back at that time. I'm not sure, I don't think it was intentional, but just having multiple versions of tables going around that sometimes were or were not calculated correctly, it hurt our ability to communicate with the board in a trustful, with a level of trust. So I like the idea of having the third party basically start with a clean slate and come to the board with what they think these same numbers would look like.
Okay. Maura.
So I still struggle with a couple of things about this. And one is the idea of having fixed percentages. And I'd be interested in knowing from the consultant, is a fixed formula, is a fixed formula approach, or a formula that fluctuates year to year, depending on the economic situation. I feel like when we set about this, we could not conceive of an economic situation that would be so drastic that it could really change and create a big swing in what the numbers looked like based on our formula. And here we are. So I think that my concern is, especially given the current economic situation and everything that's happening, is there a formula that's going to work through everything that's to come? And what does that look like? And is that different? And can there be a fixed percentage? Can a fixed percentage formula work? I don't know. And I know we also discussed, I feel like it hasn't come up tonight, that we had discussed the overall cost, or the overall cost per student, or number of students per town being a factor. I feel like that had come up and I'm still interested in that. And I will say, I'm not sure of the relevance of this to where we end up, but for me, the elephant in the room is we're struggling with an imperfect system. We have an imperfect tax system where we have homeowners, I know we all do in our districts, where they own homes and they struggle to afford the taxes on those homes. And so the value of their home may not reflect their ability to pay their taxes. And that's something I think people in all three towns probably struggle with. So when you talk about fairness and that's the umbrella that you're under, it feels really hard. And so it's like, well, what is fair when you're working in an imperfect system like that? So to me, that's just, that's what makes this really challenging.
Thank you. All right. So I guess I haven't heard something that everyone has sort of agreed on in terms of the consultant. I have definitely heard from multiple people the concept of providing sort of one set of numbers from an disinterested arm's length third party that can provide some a credible jumping off point for us all to sort of agree to move forward with. You know, I personally would hate to lose the opportunity of sort of funneling the person too early and potentially avoiding one of those options out there that we hadn't thought of. To Jeremy's point, you know, there are quite possibly things that we haven't even imagined yet that someone with this experience in this may have seen, you know, perspective, common practices. So my preference would be to leave it a bit more open-ended in terms of their initial steps, just so we don't miss out on an opportunity that we're not even aware exists yet. But, you know, we sort of need to have some, you know, straw direction pull here to know, you know, what we want this person to bring to us. Jen or Kate? I'm sorry, Kate first. Sorry, Jen.
I was hitting raise hand instead of unmute. I just wanted to speak to something Maura said earlier, and the idea that the formula that had been previously proposed was somehow fixed. It was variable. The only thing that was fixed was the weighted component of how much weight was put into value versus pupils, but it would vary year to year. That had a variable component.
Jen.
I don't remember if we decided on this or not, but are we going to provide this person with our current cost sharing the way we do it right now?
Oh yeah, I think we definitely have to start him where we are.
Okay.
We don't want him that far in the dark.
I didn't know if you're going to give it to him like piecemeal, but not, I mean, I don't know.
We don't want to drive him away.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's hard to, I mean, I guess I agree with you, Michelle, that at this point, like, I think it's hard to really like give a lot of direction other than the current cost sharing. And then you know, I know that fairness was something that came up a lot, which I think is, you know, extremely difficult to define, and everyone has their own perception of fair. So I don't know. I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, I think it's really a tough situation, you know, to you know, maybe give the person some direction in terms of looking at, you know, 3 other RSUs and how they do it, you know, and seeing if we like any of theirs. I don't know. It's a hard one. I mean, I personally, like, I'm in favor of keeping the one that we currently have. So I don't even know if that's still on the table or not, but I can't
We
remember.
keep going like this, we'll never change it. So you might
I know,
switch
right? I'm happy with that. That's good.
Vali.
Yeah, I mean, I go from one extreme to the other on this one. If we're going to give any direction, then I want the direction, as I explained, to be basically say, this is what we think is fair. Just come up with a formula that has the variables that you choose that will lead in this direction. If we don't go that route, and it sounds like the majority would rather not, then I would rather give this consultant a completely blank slate, not show them the current formula, so that we don't provide the bias that, well, maybe we don't want any change. So he's going to try to make it this similar to what we have now, and not give anything at all. Basically, just say, go meet with the 3 finance directors if that's what we decide makes sense, which I agree probably does. And this person can come with not even a finite number of options. Then we say, okay, just go talk to the 3 finance directors in the 3 towns. And based on the numbers that you get, just bring a range of options for us to look at. So I wouldn't say 1, 3, 5, or 10. And I wouldn't say where we're at now. Just say, just go find out what you need to find out and bring some options that make sense and see what we get.
Becky.
Are we talking about the 3 people from the finance committee?
No, I think they're talking about the towns. So I will just, to that point out that I don't know about Pownell, but Durham does not have a finance director. I'm sure, I don't know. Hopefully we could find someone that could provide them, depending on, I mean, if they're just looking for data, right, in terms of valuation or whatever they're looking for. I'm sure anyone in the town office could provide that for the towns, but just, in transparency, not all of them have a dedicated finance director with a background in this that could sit down and have a uber intelligent conversation with a high level consultant. But I mean, it's certainly not a bad place to start.
Well, I'm not sure what the question is that he's like, and my other question is, isn't our current formula obvious on the 279 or not?
No, our current formula, the 279 has nothing to do with how we do cost sharing. Like, numbers come from there, but they're sort of manipulated from there, which is part of the reason Scott had trouble figuring out originally, was because our formula does not match the ED 279. So,
okay.
Maddie.
So maybe every town doesn't have a finance director, but they certainly have leadership. So I would suggest that he figure out from each of the towns who is not on our school board he should talk to.
Fair enough. Kate.
Okay. I didn't understand what Maddie was saying at first. Now I get what she's saying. She was lumping school board in with town leadership. I get it now. I was just going to say that I agree with what Valley had just said about the blank slate and saying, bring us the slew of options that after you've met with whoever we think they should meet with and gathered the information of whatever we think they need to gather, we could approach it that way.
And I'm not even sure we have to dictate what they gather, right? I mean,
no.
he may know what he needs to know in order to make a educated.
Yeah. The other thing that occurred to me, I mean, the formula is publicly available on our website. So if this person knows that they might be doing this, they may have already looked at it, but we could give them the instruction not to refer to it or revisit it as they do the work.
Valley.
Yeah, I would.
Oh, I think you muted yourself. You're still muted.
This is so weird. Now, can
Okay,
you?
there you go. Yep.
It's telling me I'm muted when I'm not. Anyway, so I agree with Kate that the person probably has already looked at our budget calculations. I would have if I were this person. But we can say very explicitly, we want you to just have complete freedom to go find the information that you need and come and just have your ideas reflect your ideas, not what we currently do.
Right. We're not tied to what we have in any way. We're willing to throw it all out if you have a great idea.
Exactly.
Yep. Okay. Becky, do you feel like, as the communicator with our soon-to-be facilitator or consultant?
I think it's a blank slate. I think I need to know who he needs to meet with at the town level. And is my direction to him, that's the person who's going to give you any information you need? Or are you expecting him to meet and hear the town's perspective?
I mean, I similar to not wanting our input on them, I think he collects the data. I mean, if he needs to get it from the town or if he can get it from us, like just pure data, whoever can provide it to them, I think, if we don't want to weigh in on which, we don't want to substitute ourselves or the town perspective for the board perspective, if the goal is to truly just get, what I think they would reach out to whoever they feel like to get the information they need.
Okay, so this is what I'm now hearing. He has a blank slate. If he is going to be making the recommendation of what the funding formula should be and what he thinks is fair, however he defines it.
That sounds like a blank slate to me. Valley's first. Valley.
Yeah, I agree with Becky's assessment, but except for the part about one recommendation, I would like to have a slate of suggestions, not even a recommendation, but say these are suggestions that you may want to look at. So we can have, a few things to choose from or combine or whatever, but it would be, I think, more productive for us to not have one thing on the table and then discuss that one thing only.
So let's give me a number to give him. How about 3?
I would prefer not to give a number, but say if just use your judgment to present the number that makes sense to you.
Some alternative.
That's greater than 1.
Yes, please. Greater than 1.
Okay, I've got it.
Thank you.
Beth?
I was just going to, that was exactly what I was going to say too, is just to have multiple options. And I don't, like in Durham, I don't think there's a panel finance director, but there, is a really great town clerk that probably has really good information that could supply information if needed. So that's it.
Perfect. Maddie.
I thought I was clear, but maybe I wasn't. I just want to be really clear that I'm not suggesting that this consultant would be taking their direction from anybody representing the towns. But I do think any good consultant wants to be aware of people's perspectives. And so it's not just to get numbers, but it's also to understand perspectives. And I'm asking that they get perspectives from the town rather than diving in with us because we hired him. I don't want him to feel like I want him to be aware of the problems he's facing and the problems that we're trying to address without feeling that he's trying to satisfy anyone on the board in particular. Does that make sense?
Well, then I need to have 3 names.
Well, I mean, I would have you reach out to the chair of each town and say, who's the best person for our consultant to talk to? I mean, I can guess who they are, but I think we should have the towns tell us who they would like our consultant to talk to.
Okay. Beth.
So I guess I'm a little confused just with what Maddie said with the perspective thing, because I thought we weren't trying to influence, I guess, I know it's the town people that she's talking about, but I would want more just the hard data. I feel like because, maybe in Pownell, it's just the town clerk who doesn't really, she just wants to give the data and doesn't really have a perspective in the whole thing. And whereas in Freeport, you have a finance director that's been like really involved and probably has a lot to say about it. And so I just feel like that could, hopefully if he's good, he's gonna, see that the disparity there. But it just, to me, I would prefer to have him just gather the hard data.
I guess I'm wondering why there's no one that's more enmeshed in the perspective of the towns than the board members that serve on the finance committee. So if we're looking for perspective.
Well, I think the issue with that is, like it was said earlier, like they don't trust the numbers we've provided. So we should, I would think the whole point of this is to provide a separate, my preference is with Beth that I would like them to independently do this. And then, we know the perspectives that we can layer on once we have the potential options that they lay forward. I would request, as it relates to options, any options, I would love to see just sort of pros and cons. This one, the benefit of this is it's easy. The con of this is whatever. Just so we can, if we're taking options, we can look at them and sort of decide which of the pros are most important to us. Maddie.
I guess I wasn't being clear, and now 3 people have spoken. So yes, it's important to look at the data, but it's also important to understand where the town's preferences are, but not to necessarily try to solve for them. I'm not suggesting that, but a good consultant would say, here are the risks. Durham's not going to like this one. I know, because I sat down with him. But this is why I'm recommending option 3. Here's the risk with option 4. Freeport's not going to like it for this reason, but this is why I'm recommending it. We're hiring somebody to understand the complexity of the problem and to help us deal with what Kate described really well before, how we have lost our way with each other. I suggested the consultant in the first place because we lost our way with each other. But it doesn't mean that I just want a number cruncher who doesn't understand the complexities of the human element in this.
Well, because he's done it for multiple districts and because he's taught school finance, I feel like he understands that.
Great.
Kate.
We do have the letters from the towns. We could, if we as a board wanted to give the letters, there's the letters from each town, which provides their perspective. But I know what Maddie's struggling with, because I think I don't know if anybody will recall the conversation from back in November when we first were talking about this. There was, for me, as a number person, this is what I think is fair. And then there was me as the board member politically that I felt was fair. And, that was something I said in the meeting. And at the time, I'm not sure it was totally understood, but that is why the proposal from finance was different than what purely numbers person would put together.
Vali. Unless her computer's just taken over now.
Yeah, it's happening. Can you hear me now?
We can, yep.
Okay, sorry about that. I mean, I'm perfectly comfortable just asking this consultant to seek whatever information he needs to make his proposals and suggestions. I mean, he has experience, so he'll probably know what he needs to ask, and he can go get that information. And if he feels that just the numbers is what he needs, then it'll be that way. I suspect that maybe he'll want a little more, and he can just go find whatever he wants to be comfortable presenting options to us.
I think I'm agreeing with Vali on this, because I think they're going to know what they need. And if they feel like they need input from others, they'll seek it. So in the effort of clean slatedness, let them decide what they need to make a decision, or not a decision, but put together a presentation for us. Jen.
I hadn't thought of it until Kate brought it up, but I do think those letters from the towns might be something that maybe not initially give them, but I hate to think that we asked the towns for that information and then we didn't use it. At least we didn't offer it to the consultant. So I don't remember, to be honest with you, what any of the letters said, but I know that we asked the towns to provide some feedback. And I just think when you ask for that, you need to make sure you at least show that you took it into consideration.
Does anyone see an issue with including them? Maura?
I don't see an issue. I just had a different comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm wondering if we should also give the consultant any direction. I don't know if that I have strong feelings about this one way or the other, about considerations moving forward, because what our budget has been in the past, and maybe if he's looking at previous years, may be different. So is there anything, I'm just wondering if there's anything we want him to take into account. It's kind of like this is happening where we're doing this piece of work at a challenging time where we might be in the middle of a budgetary shift. And I'm wondering if that needs to be a part of, I don't know, that's any thoughts?
Kate.
We did have a shift during the last recession. So, I mean, we have, unfortunately, historical data that can show what happens if you run the model on the, whatever model that this person comes up with. We have historical data that can show enough variation over the last 10 years. I think that can tell you some story of what you might see if for some, we've had where Freeport's valuation dropped significantly and the other towns went up. We've had the minimum receivership come in and out. The special education adjustment has come in and out. Some years Freeport has received subsidy and the special education adjustment, sometimes not. So we have some, good historical data that I think that if this person knows what they're doing, that they would look back to that. But the reason I actually raised my hand was I also wanted to point out to everybody that, you know, everything that the Finance Committee has previously presented to the board is also publicly available. So when you're giving this direction to the consultant, do you also say, and don't look at anything that's posted on the website, because like the town's letters are there, all of our tables are there, you know. So I just want to know if that's something that we want to direct this person, like it's basically technology blackout. Do not accessing things online from our district.
Yeah. I mean, I think if we explain to them, I mean, I'm guessing Becky has explained the position we're in now, that we've sort of struggled with this for quite a while. We haven't been able to all land on a place where we were comfortable. I mean, I think it's going to be clear that, you know, our other stuff isn't going to be super helpful in terms of coming up with a solution, because if it was, we would have done it already. But I mean, I don't know if we want to tell him he can't look at it. I don't know. Vali?
Yeah, I agree that the person can decide what they need, but we can tell them, don't hold yourself to anything you see on the website, because we're looking for fresh ideas. Yeah, but going back to the question about sharing the letters from the towns, there have been multiple letters from the towns coming to us. So which letters are we talking about? The initial letters, the ones that kicked off the whole process, or which letters are we talking about? We've had multiple versions of letters.
That's a good point. Kate?
I would say if we choose to share the letters, all of them are posted with the agenda from the November or October meeting. They're all in that packet, all the town's letters that were received.
Okay. So maybe we'll use our little yes, no vote to see, to do a quick straw poll on if you are, and Candy, you can just unmute and tell us what your preference is. If you are comfortable sharing the letters from the towns, or if we should not and wait for them to request information. So yes is you want to share, and no is you want to wait till they ask for info. Can we see everybody on here? What's that? No, I've got, let's see, how many do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7 yeses, 1 no. Candy, I know you can't vote yes or no, so you can just tell us. Are you a yes?
I think we should provide any information he wants.
Okay, so that's the question. Do we provide it before he asks?
Not necessarily. We tell him what we've got and where it is.
Okay. Seems like the consensus is yes, but Maddie has her hand up, so I don't know if she has a question before we close that.
I just feel like we're overcomplicating this. I think we should provide whatever information. It's all accessible anyway. I don't think we should say to act as though it's not already available. I would love for him to get to know representatives from each of the town, understanding that he's not taking direction from any of the towns or from us. We're asking him to act with thoughtfulness and autonomy to give us the very best group of possible answers from which we could select, because we've decided to imbue him with our trust because we're having a hard time with each other.
Vali.
I agree. I think the best thing is to not provide anything up front and say there's information on the website. If you need to look at it, but it doesn't mean that what you see is what we want necessarily. So go find the information you need to do your job and bring us suggestions. And we're not going to tell you what to look for or why to look for it, and see what he comes up with.
Okay, we're back to a clean slate. Good luck, Becky. Sounds like a full clean slate.
Okay, this is what I'm saying. I'm going to say you want more than one option. Seek whatever information you want, and please provide the pros and cons of each option.
I think you're good. I have no idea where our agenda is. Here we go. All right, so now we are on to unfinished business B, 12B. So this is, as Becky mentioned earlier, the executive order has eliminated the need for us to have the annual budget meeting, the 3-town meeting this year. But in its place, we are required to hold a public hearing to hear feedback and answer questions on the budget before it goes before the voters on referendum on July 14th. So the motion, you guys have it all, received it all as an email. It's quite long. I'm just going to read a quick motion at the top. And what this does is it allows us to call the public meeting, approve the warrants for the referendum, and put out notice for that public meeting. So do we have a motion that the vote entitled "A Vote to Call a Regional School Unit Budget Referendum, Call a Public Hearing, Approve the Referendum Warrants, and Approve the Notice of Public Hearing" be approved in the form presented to this meeting, and that a copy of said vote to be included with the minutes of this meeting?
So moved. This is Kate.
Thank you, Kate. Do we have a second? Beth. Thank you, Beth. Any questions about what we're voting on? Maddie? Susanna first, sorry.
No, sorry, I think I was just seconding that.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Although, looking at, I just wanted to grab some water and coming back, which motion are we on?
We're on 12B. So the calling of the public hearing for the 24th.
Okay, I missed noting a 12B. Thank you.
Maddie.
Same question. I didn't note the 12B change to the agenda. Sorry.
It's not changed. What?
This was in
Oh, the revised agenda. Sorry, I have the updated one in my hand. So sorry, I forgot that wasn't on the original one. Right, because we didn't have the executive order approved by the time the budget went out, I believe. So sorry about that. Okay, so yes, so this is for that public meeting. We have a first, we have a second, and we are going to start this one with Lindsay.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
Susanna.
Yes.
Beth.
Yes.
Maura.
Yes.
I vote yes. Vali. Fighting with her computer. Maybe she stepped away for a second.
No, she's there. I think she's frozen.
Yeah, I don't even see her. I see. Oh, now I see her screen again, but she's not there. Okay, we'll hop back. Maddie.
Yes.
Kate.
Yes.
Jeremy.
Yes.
Candy.
Yes.
And can we see if Valley's back? No, it doesn't look like she is. Okay. So, all right. So that motion passes. So I'm just going to remind everyone that we need to have we need to have board members come in tomorrow morning between 7:30 and 11:30 to sign those public hearing notices. The reason for the tight timeline is law requires they be posted within 3 days of the board voting on it. And with Pownell and Freeport both being closed on Fridays, it means it has to get there tomorrow because the weekend days count. So Monday would be too late and we'd have to vote again. So please try and make it over to the central office tomorrow morning between 7:30 and 11:30. Okay. Oh, Kate, question.
I was just wondering, Michelle, if you could quickly explain the budget, the adoption process for if we need to use contingency funds next year, that it's not part of what we just voted for.
Not contingency funds. You mean undesignated fund balance?
Undesignated fund balance. Sorry. No.
Reserve funds. Right. So, so there was a question around whether to include a question on the ballot as it relates to the use of reserve funds. So if there was a curtailment next year, and we wanted to access funds in our reserve accounts, could we do that? There was the option to include a question on the ballot for that would give us that authority now, or to leave it off. And if it were to be needed, my understanding is that we would have to hold a public hearing. It wouldn't have to be a referendum vote, but we'd have to hold a public hearing around that request to use those funds in the reserve account. So does that explain what you were asking about, Kate? Is that good, or do you need more? I don't even see her anymore.
Okay, I don't know what happened. I don't even see me on there anymore. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yep.
Okay. Yes, that answers, or that addresses what I wanted to make sure the board understood for next year, so that if we had to access those funds, you weren't all caught off guard that we'd have to do some sort of public meeting or hearing and get approval from the towns to do so.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that reminder. Okay, so we are on to new business 13, consideration. Do we have a motion for consideration and approval to authorize the superintendent to hire staff between June 11th, 2020, tomorrow, and the first school board meeting in September of 2020? This, yeah, we'll wait for a motion. Susanna, I saw your hand up for the first. Do we have a second? And Mara, thank you. So this is a vote we take every year, every year to allow the superintendent so that she doesn't have to wait to hire additional staff over the summer or call special meetings with the school board. This provides her that authority. It's one we typically do each year. Anybody have any questions on that? Or are we good to vote on that one? All right. So this time we are going to start with Jen.
Yes.
Susanna.
Yes.
Beth.
Yes.
Maura.
Yes.
I vote yes. Volley.
Yes.
Maddie.
Yes.
Kate.
Yes.
Jeremy.
Yes.
Candy.
Yes.
And Lindsay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so 13B, consideration and approval to revise the RSU 5 Educator Professional Growth and Evaluation Handbook. Cynthia, do you want me to do the motion before you speak?
Sure,
Okay,
thank
so
you.
we have a motion for that. And then Cynthia will go through the update. Nobody wants to move it? Beth, thank you.
Second, Kate.
Thank you, Kate. All right, take it away, Cynthia.
Okay, so you have 13B is the document you need to be looking at in your handbook. I'm going to just kind of give you an overview. I'm not going to go through it page by page. I'm assuming that you've read through it, but my overview will flow through the document. And then at the end of my of telling you the process that we use. I have also with me tonight, Emily Grimm, principal at Mass Landing, and Lisa Demick, principal at Powell Elementary, who also sit on the PEPG committee, who will also be available to answer any questions that you may have, since they use this document very regularly. Okay, so the background on this is the focus of our PEPG committee is this year was really about the law changes that had happened the year before. So I'm going to go through those and in a brief way, but I think it will help you understand the process that we took a little bit better. So as a result of LD 92, that was an act to amend the educator evaluation requirements that was approved. That was approved on April 11th of 2019, which two things, which removes the SLO requirement from the evaluation system, and it says may include but may not require the use of student learning and growth measures or state assessment results as a measure of educator effectiveness. So it removes the MEA piece from it. And then the second bullet on that is requires that the steering committee members be made up of more teachers than administrators. And it says a majority of the steering committee members must be teachers and must be chosen by the local representation of applicable collective bargaining unit. And the teachers in the school administrative unit are covered by the collective bargaining agreement. Any revisions to the performance evaluation and professional growth system made by the steering committee must be reached by consensus. So that was part of the process that we used, was full consensus on any of the decisions that were made during the revision process. Also, we also had to consider LD 345, an act to help new teachers succeed. This law reduced the probationary period of the new teachers from 3 years to 2 years, with an effective date of FY21, which is all of the new hires that we're currently hiring for the next school year. So with that, these law changes were the primary foci of our work on the PEPG committee this year and resulted in most of the revisions you'll see in the handbook. So I'll take each of those pieces I just talked about separately, and afterward, like I said at the beginning, I'll give Lisa and Emily, both who are on the committee, a chance to answer any questions that you may have. So the first thing that we did in this document at the very beginning of the year was to increase the number of teachers on the steering committee. The administrators and the teachers from the committee sent out communications encouraging other educators to become participating members. And as you can see, right, I think it's on the second or third page, that 3 additional teachers are now on the committee. Those names are underlined. So that was number 1. The next thing we did was we made small revisions in the evaluation cycles and the timeline sections. So those are the next couple of pages that mostly comply with those law changes. So the probationary period going from 3 years to 2 years. And we made some date changes of when things were due. That was decided by consensus because of the timelines, took into consideration the amount of time it takes to go through the whole process. And then lastly, our primary focus was to discuss student growth measures. As I stated earlier, LD 92 states that all revisions must be made by consensus. This collaborative process evolved over several meetings, resulting in what is before you tonight. So I'll expand a little bit on that process. The first thing that we did over a couple of meetings was really to identify all of the areas where we had agreement unanimously. And I'm going to read those to you right now. We all agreed around the table that we all value student data. We all agreed that we value student growth. Student data conversations, it was decided that we all agreed that they would live in the evaluation system. So they don't have to, but we agreed that they still would live in the evaluation system. We agreed that we will no longer use those to be calculated by that matrix. That's why you'll see in the document that matrix is crossed out. And educators, we all agreed that it would be very important for educators to reflect on their student growth. The student data would be connected to goals, goal setting for the next year. And in those rubrics that the teachers have, domain 4, in those Marshall rubrics, it already addresses assessments and looks at student work all the time. So it's already embedded in those professional rubrics.
So I think I'm gonna put in a.
My little guy with big eyes. You can turn
Could we have folks mute their phones if they wouldn't mind?
And then we all agreed that a debriefing of the data should be very timely and at least yearly. So whatever data they're looking at, it wouldn't be done, it wouldn't be reviewed 6 months after that data was collected. It would be within a reasonable amount of time. And then lastly, the student data component will live in the e-portfolio that is shared between the evaluator and the evaluatee. And that's where the reflections would also occur. So starting with what we agreed upon, the rest of the process, we worked through each part of the handbook to reflect what our student review, process would look like. So that is really, in a nutshell, a lot of work, and I tried to make it concise and understandable for you. And the last meeting that we had, we actually, we had done all of the work and all of those changes, and we went through it line by line. And so there was true consensus that occurred in that process. So that is it for my presentation, and I didn't get any email questions, but I didn't know if anybody had any for anybody today.
Kate.
Yes, I don't understand a lot of what this says.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering if you could just break it down for me, because I can see SLO is deleted and I want to know the SLO was and what you replaced it with.
Okay, so SLO is really what the student measure was, and they were very specific. For example, everyone in grades 4 through 8 had the MEA test data as their as one of their SLOs for ELA and for math. We use the MAP assessment for all the way up through grade 10. So those were very specific, and we tried to have as many common assessments as possible. SLO became a bad word, or, it just had a connotation with people that wasn't positive. And so in our discussions, it's still looking at student data, but it's the student data that teachers are using that's meaningful. It doesn't have to, it's not going to be the MEA, for example. They can still use the MAP assessment. It's best if they use common assessments because there's some reliability in that. We want teachers to be talking about those as grade levels together. The evaluator and the evaluatee will talk about those together. So we've really rephrased it as student, student growth, a student growth review process by looking at different student measures. So it's still looking at student data. It's just not called an SLO in the technical term anymore.
With Cynthia, is the SLO the same as like what we were getting for like building goals, where they were having like X% of students will meet or exceed the reading standard? the building level goals, is that different? Is the SLO student specific or is it?
So an SLO, for example, an art teacher would have a separate SLO that would be like a process for where the students started with a piece of artwork to how they, at the end of the unit, they grew with shading or something like that. I mean, I'm not an art teacher, but so each teacher had an SLO. Some teachers had the same SLO because of what they taught. Like all English teachers in those grade levels had the MAP assessment or the MEA, for example. So it's not the same, to answer your question. Because all of the administrators are definitely going to be looking at their MEA data, and we're going to be looking at how do we grow students. So there's lots of pieces of data that we're going that everyone is using. The ones that are common, like the MAP assessments and the MEA, those you can compare. You can compare across grade levels. You can compare the typical growth. We use our comparative schools to compare those two. The SLOs are, some of them are teacher created. They're social studies teachers maybe creating they might use a MAP assessment because they're working with the ELA teacher. They may use a different one. And so those, all the administrators know what the teachers have been using. So they're different, but some of the data is the same.
Vali.
I can see you're still.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions, Cynthia, about the way the 4 ratings, 4, 3, 2, 1 are described on page 8. Highly effective says master teacher performance that meets very demanding criteria. I may not have looked closely enough, but I didn't find those criteria clearly described in this document. So I would want to know how you define the criteria, or I mean, if I were a teacher, I would want to know what criteria am I being, what standard I'm being held to. So there may be a Marshall rubric that's not included here that has those criteria, but that's one question. The other question, number 1, does not meet standards. It reads, an acceptable performance leading to an improvement plan in tested support, and if improvement isn't made within a reasonable amount of time, dismissal. If we're talking about dismissal, I would want to know what is the reasonable amount of time. It seems very ambiguous. So I would suggest that that be changed to read, if improvement isn't made within the timeline for completion as defined in the directed growth plan. Because there is a plan there that defines these times. So I would assume that that is a reasonable amount of time, but it's a little less ambiguous.
Okay, so I've written down your suggestion for the 1, and I feel like that we'll take both of those points. I feel like that sounds reasonable. I'm going to ask Lisa and Emily to weigh in on that second one that Vali just said, just to see if that makes sense to you. So Vali, what I have is within the timeline agreed upon in the directed growth plan.
Right.
Okay.
Or a timeline for completion as defined in directed growth plan, any of those.
So Emily or Lisa, does that make sense? I mean, it does to me, but I also want to ask you.
No, it doesn't to me.
Okay.
So I want to chime in.
Okay.
That I don't want to mislead the board. So in a directed growth plan, there is not always a timeline that I think you're thinking about. Like there's not usually by, what are we at? By June of 2021, if you haven't met this, then that results in dismissal. When we get to something that is this serious, we reach out to the attorneys and we make sure that the documentation has been done, that we've provided adequate supports. So it's never as black and white as it's sounding to me if we put that phrase in there. So I would caution against that. And I don't have, I think it's good food for thought. I understand what you're requesting, Valley. So maybe we can work on some language, but I'm not going to be able to come up with that on the spot.
I think the other thing to consider in practice, like I actually think that it being vague here is helpful, because often directed growth plans are put in place when a teacher is at the improvement necessary lens too. So I think like trying to create this paragraph into a situation that reflects all of the needs that come up in the evaluation of staff risks being a little bit limiting. I think putting that language in one makes it seem like you have to be performing at a level 1 to have a growth plan, which is not in practice how it typically works in the district.
Okay. So in page 12, where you basically bullet all the things that are included in the plan, there is one bullet that says timeline for completion. So there's a timeline there for completing the growth plan, but you would rather not have that timeline as described in that plan define when to dismiss someone or not. Is that correct? Is that what I'm hearing?
Kind of.
Okay.
It really is just, I mean, you do try to give a timeline, but there's just so many other variables, because so many times they might be improving in part of it. And so, it just, you have to really look at, well, if they improved enough. So I know that's, I know that's vague, and I guess I just encourage you to kind of keep it vague, because I think it could, the more we tighten it up, I think the more complicated it's going to get.
No, and I'm fine. I'm just bringing it up because it raised a question in my mind. I mean, you guys are the professionals. You live this day in and day out, so you know what the impact is of having more strict language. But I just needed to hear it and learn why it needs to be so vague. I mean, sounds like it needs to be that way. So I'm happy with that answer.
And all of the teachers that were on the committee, and there's several of them, I mean, they did come to consensus with this whole document as well. So that's telling too, right? And they're representative of the CEA. With regard to your first comment about the highly effective, so we have appendices that we don't bring to you to vote on, because the appendices include in Appendix A, they are on the website, and those are all of the rubrics for every one of the jobs that are under the collective bargaining agreement, from teachers, special ed teachers, strategists, they all have their own. And it's very clearly outlined in those rubrics what a 4 is, what a 3 and a 2 and a 1. So that's where those criteria are defined very clearly. Okay.
Maddie put her hand down. Okay, Kate.
I'm sorry, it's still not clear to me how the student growth is incorporated into this. I still don't even understand how the SLO, like when you say you previously used certain, I can't remember the term you used because I wasn't familiar with it. NMAP, something like that.
Map assessment. And that's the NWEA, but it's really, the NWEA is really a vendor. And so that map assessment is the actual assessment. It's the same thing.
Okay, so when you were using that previously, you're just looking at the data, or are you trying to, there a target of the percent of kids that are supposed to be eating?
So previously, the teachers would get the data back on how their kids scored, and there's a growth target that's supposed to be met. Right. And so they were supposed to make half the growth. And so all of the kids in there, all of the students that they have under the teacher of record. So whoever the teacher of record was is where they're getting their instruction. All of the scores would be, you know, what did they have at the year before? What's the expected growth? What did they have now? Did they make their growth target? And then on the right side of the column, it was yes or no. And then if they had 20 kids and 15 of them made their growth target, 75% of the students would have made their, you know, would have made their growth target. So that number, the 75%, would be calculated in by that matrix. Okay, they got a 3 on their professional rubrics that, you know, overall, so they have effective rating there. However, well, in this case, the example I gave, they would have an effective as well, right? So they'd be effective. So that was how it was calculated through that matrix. On the left side, okay, that is that clearer?
I get that. All right, that's what I wanted to know.
Okay.
The second part was, now we don't have the SLO. We're just using review data, student growth review.
Right.
How is that now incorporated into this evaluation? You're telling me the law did away with that portion, and so you don't have to do that anymore?
The law has said that there's no longer a requirement of SLOs. In our committee, we had long discussions about, like those things I read to you, we still value student data. We still need to discuss it. We need to reflect on it. We need to improve our instruction where we're seeing areas of concern. So we didn't want to leave it out. We felt it was valuable. We didn't want it to be part of an additional, matrix. So in domain 4, there are several indicators there that are reflective of assessments. And so there's already a place for that in there. It was kind of like doubling it.
Okay.
And then this gives more latitude for different types of discussions and use of lots of different pieces of data that are really more authentic to the work that's happening every day in the classroom. And Emily or Lisa, if you'd like to jump in and give maybe some concrete examples that you can think of.
I put my hand up because I think you did a beautiful job, Cynthia. Kate, I think something to think about is that I think part of the reason the state backed off on this is they had such a narrow view of how we should be using assessment data. So they were dictating one way. And I think what we tried to do as a committee is to really look at that assessment cycle happening all the time as part of the practice. So what we're really trying to do is to build kind of the teacher knowledge around how are they seeing assessment data as feedback for themselves. And that, in addition to domain 3, it also goes into domain 1 where there's planning and preparation. And so after any given observation, part of the conversation can be around, the decision making and looking at how the data is informing the grouping a teacher is doing, the decision to provide enrichment or, what pre-assessment information a teacher gathered before teaching a unit. And so the SLO really had a very narrow view. Like when you take the MEA, for example, teachers weren't getting that back until the October after, the kids left. We still need to look at that data, as sort of one piece of a triangulation, but the committee was really committed to assessment as a more ongoing part of good teaching.
Okay. So it's less applying a hard number to it. It's more using the data in the evaluator is using that data in their rubric for how they're evaluating. It's not purely numbers based. Okay. Okay. I get it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Lisa. Any other questions on the Professional Growth and Evaluation Handbook? I'm going to ask Ginny to remind me, we did the motion and second already, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, so we will go through the roll call vote. Susanna?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Maura?
Yes.
I vote yes. Folly?
Yes.
Maddie?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Candy?
Yes.
Lindsay?
Yes.
And Jen?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we are at 13C. This was one of the adjustments to the agenda we made at the beginning to add a board discussion on inclusion. I'm gonna send it back to Becky's way. No?
I don't, I think I kind of laid out in my superintendent's report what I would kind of see as the next steps and what, you know, is currently happening, but I'm happy to take feedback or comments on that.
Susanna?
Yeah, so I'm unmuted. Not necessarily in direct response to Becky, and I have her letter. I'll look at that in a moment. But I know I've sent this around to everybody generally, but I'm proposing that we write a charge to develop a committee or a task force on inclusion and equity as a way to ensure accountability. I know I've been on 2 DEI committees over the past year plus. I've been piloting a program nationally. There's a lot of work out there. Several of us are involved in different organizations. Their frameworks, we have the know-how and access to it. And I kind of feel that at the moment, this is our best way forward. Partly because racism's been a backbone of this country for 400 years, and we need to take direct and active anti-racism work to address the culture within the school system. And many of the other school functions rely on us taking this action. And I think so far, a lot of action that we've spoken about in the past has been more lip service than change, concrete change. I don't know how many of you have direct experience. I lived in a region of the world for a while where I was targeted for the color of my skin. And here, you know, being blonde and white, that's not the case. But I've been in jail twice. I've been interrogated by police with an assault rifle against my chest. I've been knifed. I've been denied access to air raid shelters, all based on the color of my skin. And it's different. I wasn't born there. And I only was there for a few years. But it did teach me that being targeted for nothing more than the color of your skin is very real and very hurtful. And I think that's something that when it's not part of your daily existence is very easy to minimize. So with having a committee, I feel that there are 4 main reasons for this. One is it will be a unified source of data collection, however we want that to be, an analysis. We've heard students that are involved in collecting data now, and so we need to get involved in that. Strategy, how are we going to match these objectives within the educational environment? What's the implementation of these initiatives? And what is the evaluation and our ability to continually audit the plan? My idea would be that the committee would comprise board members, students, faculty, parents, other community stakeholders. Exact composition can be open for discussion. We need student voices, but it's not up to them to come to us. And I think we've, in the past, maybe been defensive, and we need to, you know, what student groups exist now? Students are talking, and we need to really be open. I know the idea of an audit has floated around. I think we need some kind of audit. I know with small groups, we risk exposing individuals who may not want to be exposed and privacy issues. But there are systems, Becky spoke of one earlier today. There are systems out there, so I believe we can find one that will suit our needs. Things that I think this committee can focus, and part of having a committee would be able to talk to different people to figure out what individuals really want, but education of the staff and the administration. You know, there's magnificent materials out there. And I would hope that the staff, and whether that's, you know, board level, school administration, or whether that's teachers, whoever's having direct involvement with students, bus drivers, anybody needs to be involved in these, reading these materials, trainings, what is required as far as the staff in terms of training. And I know there's state trainings that are required. The DOE's put out their the Maine Department of Education put out their statement last week. State trainings so far, I think, are insufficient. There are other types of trainings. Other schools have initiatives. And this leadership, I think there's some initiatives within the schools on diversity, but this leadership needs to come from the top down as well. And that's really, I think, where we need to come in. You know, other schools have diversity committees. I know Waynflete has diversity and equity committee, which they have faculty and staff. They also have a parent version of it. RSU 40, MSAD 51, Falmouth, South Portland. They all have some forms that they're working on. And I think not only can we avail extra help, external help with the equity side, but with the actual implementation. I mean, you know, Greeley is partnered with Community Change. Southern Poverty Law Center is involved in places. Falmouth has done some work with the Racial Equity Institute. Waynflete's done with Seeds of Peace. There's the People of Color Conference, Student Diversity Leadership, White Privilege Conference, Georgetown Day, Diversity Directions. These are all groups that local schools are working with, and we can work with them as well. We need to look at the hiring opportunities, the employment within the school, examining the culture, the biases, hiring practices, where these jobs are organized, who's on the hiring committees, what's the current representation, how this aligns with demographics. Spoken a little bit about the curriculum review and that being underway with social studies and literature teachers. I think we can extend this beyond race. I know it's mentioned that students who are Jewish or of Jewish descent don't feel that the Holocaust is necessarily appropriately taught. So, you know, we can look at gender, socioeconomic status, religion, nationality, etc. How to foster a community of respect. And this gets into the language that's used and students saying that they're referred to their nationality, partly, not necessarily by their name. How do we generate this community? And I know Maddie's spoken a bit about the eradication of Challenge Day. And I don't think Challenge Day was sufficient for this, but it seems that what is missing from Challenge Day's replacement is this element of building that community of respect. You know, having a fora for community, and I think a committee can be a forum for, you know, and offer programming, having people to gather in the FPAC, having a central group of students and staff, and, you know, providing learning opportunities and community-based discussions, talking about the role of the student resource officer. And I know there's been discussions in schools around the state and around the country about that role. And, you know, what is the point of having the SRO, and how are these needs actually getting made through that position? What can we do with that? And I think the big thing is that the committee for me enables ongoing dialogue and accountability. And when we're talking about basic human rights and dignity, those things to me are pretty paramount. And I'm worried that they could fall through. So that's what I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Susanna. Jen.
It's really rough to go after that one. I just wanted to say, Becky mentioned it early on about the, you know, I think that the passion that is being exhibited by our students right now is something that we should kind of try to grab onto and take some direction. And I think that, you know, full disclosure, one of the kids on the video had a last name Galetta. And so, you know, I do know that being brought in and being those students really appreciated that approach. And so I think that that's a really important place to start, is with listening to students and really just gathering info. I think this is a huge process. It's a long process, and it has so many parts. I mean, to talk about racism and then curriculum, and I mean, it is just, it just is in every piece of what we're doing. So I would agree that a committee would be a good place to start. I just think it's such a heavy load that we're going to be dealing with.
Thanks, Jen. Lindsay.
I guess I just want to echo everything Susanna said and what Jen said. I think it's a great first start that we're going to be listening to the students. I think it's brilliant whoever brainstormed having a third party be the, I don't know, are they the MC, the mediator? I'm not sure how that's going to operate. I guess I would ask, will we be allowed at that? I would really love to be there. You know, full disclosure, the way I came to the position that I came to be playing in Sunday night was Finn wanted to go to Portland, and my 15-year-old wanted to participate, and I wasn't sure I wanted to take him into Portland. And a couple of people suggested, why don't we do something in Freeport? And it really, whoa, Pandora's box. But so I think we're off to a decent start. I would say I'm exceedingly concerned, and my son, my high school son, has confirmed for me, and I saw it on video Sunday night. I recognize that we live in a country that prizes its rights, whether those rights are wrong or harmful to others. However, I do not think there's any place in a public school system to tolerate hate language. And I think the Confederate flag is hate language. That's just wrong. And anyone that could say that falls under the First Amendment, I think that's one place we need to start. It's hate, and it's tolerated right now, and I disagree with it. So I think that's a very easy start. That doesn't involve a heavy lift. That's a simple right or wrong. And I agree, we need training, because half of why we're in this mess that we're in is because none of us know how to talk about it. And we fumble and we misstep, or we ignore it altogether. And we can no longer afford to ignore it. And I think while I fully acknowledge we are a predominantly white community, we do our young people of color, as well as our young white children, a major disservice if we do not hit this on the head. And I've now been in this for a week or so, and we're behind the 8 ball, as Susanna mentioned. Falmouth's been at it. What's our private school? Waldorf's been at it. Cumberland and North Yarmouth have been at it. So it's time for us to get on it, and get on it seriously. And so I guess I echo everything Susanna said, and I don't think, yeah, I think that's all I need to say on the topic right now. But I do not think Confederate clothing should be allowed in our schools, any of our schools, because it's hate. And I think a committee is a start. It is going to be a heavy lift. This is 400 years in the making. It's going to be 100, years in its undoing. But I don't think that's a reason to put it off. I don't think because something's hard, you don't do it. I think we owe it to our children. We owe it to the people who we've had our knees on their neck for 400 years to pick it up and start dealing with ourselves. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you, Lindsay. Vali.
That's another one hard to follow, but I'm going to be succinct and basically say that I agree with everything that's been said. I do agree that we need an audit. I have heard from my own children and students about, examples of implicit bias, and not just bias and not implicit, but very direct. I know that a lot of the emotion and rage and anger that we have seen probably stems from cumulative injuries, some of which are not being generated at our schools or at our district. But I do believe that we are partly responsible for that effect of the accumulation of injuries. So I think we really do need an audit to find out exactly how we're responsible for, creating pain and harm. And I think that a third party would be the best way to, one, find out where we're at, and two, lead us in the steps that we need to take to remediate the situation.
Thanks, Sally. Maddie.
When I went to the march on Sunday and showed up after we walked around the block to hear the first unscheduled speaker, I was really surprised. And I do want to acknowledge that it was some difficult things were said about people in our community, in our educator community, that were really hurt. They were hurtful and they were hard to hear. And I'm sad that happened. I wish that had not happened. At the same time, the level of anger and rage did call out to be listened to. So I think it's appropriate that we're acknowledging what we heard from that person and from the others who spoke afterwards, with some recognition that we have work to do that clearly we didn't think we had to do. I'm disappointed in us. We have had members of this board ask for more proactive leadership around this area in the last couple of years, and we've been slow to act on it. I know we're extremely busy, but I guess I wish we were more cognizant of our role as leaders in our community and people who shape our culture. Public educators in a community shape the culture. So I say that also to underscore how important this time is in history. So not only on the school board, but other organizations, institutions all over our country, people are wrestling with this. And it's scary, especially as white people of some privilege. We're afraid to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, but it doesn't absolve us of the need to attempt to do the right thing and to set about this difficult work. So I do support this committee. I don't know exactly how it will look, like Susanna says. I think it's important that we start with something and make it something that will be longstanding. It must include student voice, and it must include teacher voice at the least. I know we all have good intentions, but just because people and organizations have good intentions doesn't mean we have good outcomes. So I think Becky was right in directing us to look at, what are we doing already, and then seeing what we need to do more. I really liked earlier this evening, I think it was Maura who said, we need to do whatever we can to ensure that people who are uncomfortable speaking in public also have an opportunity to be heard. And I'm not sure the best way to do that, because some of what we did hear in that feedback was that also students don't feel comfortable being singled out necessarily, even in private. So that's a difficult task. So we could really use some professional direction in how do we engage voices of people who feel other. So I'm talking about Black students and brown students and non-cisgendered students, and just students who feel like they're in a minority in some way. I think that's really important. I think a curriculum review is very important, and I want to underscore that I think this should happen in early education as well as throughout high school, because in early childhood is where we have the best opportunity to teach about inclusion and open-mindedness and open-heartedness. I have been a little frustrated with our curriculum, and I've just heard anecdotally since before I was on the school board that that there have been frustrations in our history curriculum throughout the grade levels. And I do feel, as a person of Jewish descent, that Holocaust teachings and genocide teachings are underrepresented. And Indigenous history, we've done some very partial inquiry about with regard to changing the October holiday to Indigenous Peoples Day, but are we doing enough educating there? What about Black American history? That's really important. And thank you, Susanna, for bringing up Challenge Day. I think maybe you've heard me speak about Challenge Day a number of times, and I think maybe I never quite had the opportunity to say exactly this about it. We've focused a lot in the last year or so on social and emotional well-being, which is a really important area of focus. But one thing that Challenge Day has done is it gives an opportunity for people for the students who participate, who feel unseen, to feel seen, and for inclusion to be talked about in a way that a light is shown. I'm not being very articulate about this, but it's skillfully guided by excellent facilitators who've had a lot of training. And that cross the line exercise brings out so many aspects of a person's life where they might feel alone. And that is such an important inclusion culture changing kind of a first step. I agree, we have never done a good enough job or had enough of the resources to make Challenge Day become part of the culture in our high school. But I remain extremely disappointed that we failed to try, and that instead, because of a scheduling difficulty, we chose to just throw it out. And it may not be the right thing, but the LL Bean Day, as lovely as it is, in no way gets to that kind of culture shifting opportunity that I think our students need to have. And so I once again, with this new lens on it, ask that we think about what kinds of opportunities we're giving our students to regularly think about all of the students in their community and how inclusive they are with one another. Thank you.
Becky.
I'm just responding to, I think it was Susanna's question about whether board members can go to the student forum, and that is not open to board members just because, you know, we're still have, well, I think it's a couple of reasons. It's supposed to be a student forum, and secondly, you know, we have a limit because of how many people we can have in one gathering. We can look at other ways to bring board members together with students if that's something we want in the future. But for next week, that is a student forum.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. I think it was Lindsay who had asked that question earlier. So it's okay. Beth.
I was not at the gathering on Sunday, so the news came to me secondhand around all of the events and you know, everything that's going on. And I just wanted to say I was sort of in the same place of feeling probably complacent and thinking we're doing okay, and you know, thinking so I think there's a lot of learning going on for all of us. And I'm grateful for the students that have stepped forward and been able to open up and say their experiences, because it's something, as myself, here I am doing my thing, and not thinking about it because it doesn't affect me daily. I know it's out there, but it didn't seem like it was right in our faces, and it's just my own inexperience. And so I'm grateful that this has been brought to the forefront and that I am able to learn, and I do want us to do better. And so I just want to echo the same wonderful things that people have been saying here around forming the committee and doing the hard work and getting the input that we need, the professional help where we need it, and doing the curriculum evaluation seems paramount, and especially going down to the lower levels as well. I just think that having that discussion be made part of what goes on in our schools all the way up through just is going to create something really, hopefully, incredible and life changing for a lot of people in many ways. So that is, I just want to echo the same thing as well.
Thank you, Beth. Maura.
So I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I'm glad that we're undertaking this conversation, and that that our students were so brave to share their stories and their experiences. I am concerned about, and I agree with the formation of a committee of some of the reasons that Susanna mentioned, the ongoing dialogue and the accountability, and just making sure this is a sustained focus as we move forward and carry out this work. And I think that listening to the students is great, and hearing their voice, and I know they will help us identify some areas where we are not succeeding, but I do have some concerns about, and I think this gets back to one of the letters that the board received about students, where this alumnus mentioned students having to educate teachers about this. So I really feel strongly that proactively, both as a board and the superintendent and the administrators should undertake learning on this, should undertake training. The training that I had an opportunity to go to last fall was excellent. The Racial Equity Inc. training, it was an entire weekend. So that's something to keep in mind. But I feel as board members and having our administrators see, I feel like we need to start on the same page in terms of how the information that we have when we approach these issues. And I think the problem with something like this is we aren't all on the same page. So it's difficult to figure out how to move forward when we're not all working from the same understanding of historical institutionalized racism. I mean, I will tell you, there were things that I learned in that training that I didn't know in my whole life. And so I think that to me, that would be another piece that's important as we're deciding how to move forward, that we make a commitment as a board and as an administration to have this learning at the top level. And then, obviously, I would like to see that with teachers as well. But I think that that's really important. And the other thing I wanted to say is I agree with the equity audit, and I'm not sure if this would be a different person, but I'd like to explore us having a consultant that could help guide the work of a committee, because this is difficult work, and it involves difficult conversations. And I can tell you, in that room, in that racial equity training, when they look at you and they ask you to go around the room and tell you what you like about being white, it is an uncomfortable conversation. And there can be some fragility around when there are unintended consequences of things that have happened in our schools. And I think Maddie referenced some of that. We are going to ask difficult questions, and we are going to get uncomfortable answers. And that's hard to deal with sometimes. And having someone that can support us and show us the way forward in a productive way, where it doesn't end up with people getting defensive or upset, that's tough to do. And so I want to make sure that we do it right and have the appropriate support and appropriate resources to have those conversations. So I would be in favor of exploring even grant funding. I'm sure there's a lot of different organizations out there that are doing this work right now, because it is so important. I feel like this is a watershed moment in our country's history for dismantling racism, institutionalized racism. And I feel like our school absolutely has a part in that. I think every institution does. So I would be in support of all this work, exploring if there'd be some grant funding to hire a consultant or something else to support us, because I'm very aware we have a lot of other things going on, and I would like our staff and our administrators and Becky to be supported as they can, because this is going to be difficult work, and it's going to be at times emotionally exhausting work for everyone. So thank you.
Thanks, Maura. Kate.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you all are saying. I understand the concept of additional supports for students. I understand training for teachers. I understand teaching students empathy and respect. Where I'm not on the same page with you all is some of the terms you're throwing around and the definition of them. And I think that terms like institutional racism mean something totally different for me than probably all of you. And so when we're talking about implementing curriculum on this, it's, to me, what you're all saying, I understand what curriculum is. I don't understand clearly, it's not well defined to me what you mean for what you have, what you're envisioning to teach students. And if that's not well defined, I just am resistant to that concept until I can better understand what you mean by that. I think that, recently within the last week, we've had some communications amongst the board members pushing for this district to take what I view as a very slanted position on some of these issues. And I feel like we, in fact, are taking a very good measured approach to this. I think that the fact that, the communication that came out so far from the administration, I'm not completely happy with it for different reasons, probably, definitely, than other folks on the board are not happy with it. And I think that's a signal that we are taking a good approach as a school system to make sure we're not stepping into the political aspect of this issue. And so I support the idea of the committee. I support many of the concepts that you all are talking about, but you lose me a little bit on curriculum.
Thanks, Kate. Vali.
I just wanted to refer back to what Maura was saying about the importance of training for staff. And I want to acknowledge something that hasn't been acknowledged in this conversation yet. And is that some of our staff were called out by name on Sunday. And I just want to say that personally, I felt that to be particularly painful and difficult. And I understand why the student did so and did go that way. I didn't think it was necessary to call people out by name. And I want to acknowledge the pain that caused to those staff who at least I believe firmly, if they caused any pain or harm to anyone in the school, was done unintentionally. So I just want to make sure that we acknowledge that if that there's pain also there, and then the best way forward is probably just to have good training so that people are aware of the impact of their words and actions or lack thereof.
Thanks, Vali. Susanna.
I'm just referring back to Maura's comment about a third party involved in guiding a committee, and just that those groups exist, and they exist exactly for that. And they're designing systems for schools. They've been working in schools, and I probably have 15 written down on the piece of paper right in front of me. I mean, they're everywhere. So I think, both guiding the audits, some sort of audit, but also how the committee goes forward is their systems there.
Lindsay.
Yeah, I guess I would just follow on what two comments. The one that Maura made, I feel strongly she used brilliant language when she said this is a watershed moment. This really feels like a turning point. So I wanted to call that out and agree with Susanna that outside guidance would help guide us on curriculum. I don't think that that's necessarily up to those of us who haven't done this work or done this training. And thirdly, I'd like to just say I bristle a little bit at when you use the term political, because I don't think, for me personally, this is humanitarian, this is bipartisan work, this is not political. But that's me, that's where I'm at on this spectrum. And I guess I just have to point out that I bristle a little bit at calling race equity political. I'm confused by that it seems humanitarian. It seems right versus wrong. Again, I think Maura said it so well when she said we're all at different places on the spectrum. We're all looking at this through different lenses, but I just needed to respond to that. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. Okay, so I have more hands up. They're all from folks we've heard from already. I'm just cognizant of the time here at 10 after 10, and we still have several items on the agenda. I mean, I'm not sure I heard from anybody that spoke about this that wasn't in favor of the formation of a committee at some point. I guess my question is a matter of timing and practical implementation. Do we feel like that audit is the first step to help guide our next steps? So we pursue that first in terms of next steps. And I'm just going to throw out there, I am not opposed to this committee. I think all of the items that have been noted are worthy of our time, of our effort, and necessary to when you know more, when you know better, you do better. So I think all of those are great things for us to be taking on and moving forward and making strides to improve the district. I just want to point out that there are a lot of things that we have on the plate. So I'm just going to prepare people when we have our retreat in August that we may be revisiting some of our other strategic goals, things that we want to, we plan to accomplish over the next couple of years, because this is big work. This is requires a lot of time and effort from a lot of different people. And, to do it right, we may need to make space for it on the plate. So, and I don't think that's a bad idea. But I just want to throw that out there, that we just need to be cognizant of the hours in the day that we have to work with. I guess I'd be interested to hear, do we think the audit is the next step and we should be moving forward on that front now to see if we can do that over the summer? I don't know the timing or what those look like. Maybe someone who has has some experience. I know Susanna sounds like she's going to be our go-to call on people to reach out to in terms of this. I got a yes vote from Maddie on the equity audit for the next step. Anybody feel like that's not the proper next step to go here? Okay. Okay. Beth and Jen, do you have a question, comment?
My comment was that I don't know if the committee should come before the audit and the committee decides about the audit. That I don't have a preference. I'm just thinking that if we have an audit done, then we would be handing a committee the information, or if we had a committee, they would look at the first right steps to take. I just see as two options.
Well, thanks for confusing it all, Jen. That's an excellent point. Okay, so I don't know. I'm looking to Becky to see if she has a preference or suggestion.
I think that my suggestion would be that Cynthia maybe connect with Susanna to get some of those connections that she has, and to look out and maybe talk to the consultant or some of these organizations that do that, and then they could kind of recommend. Having not done it to this level before, it in some ways it makes sense to me if we can find somebody to do the audit, that is not a bad place to start, and then the committee could come together and say, okay, what are we going to tackle first, right? Because it is as you've all said, there are multiple kind of prongs to this. So I just think we need to do some research in the next, few weeks around what does it look like, and then, maybe we could report out. I don't know, maybe I think we need to decide whether we want to have a meeting after the budget hearing. That would be.
We were planning on that, right? I think we had a few things on there, like your review potentially, right? No?
Well, that's true, probably. Yeah. And then, I think what I'm going to say to the cost sharing consultant is let us know when you have something to present, and we'll just give him the time that he needs to work on that. And I have no idea how much time that'll be, but we could probably reach out and get some information in the next couple of weeks about, we checked with this organization or that organization, and this seems to be the way to go.
Yeah, because I also think the formation of the committee and the folks on it may also be impacted by what the audit shows, right? Like if we see big needs in the hiring versus the curriculum, like those might be different people at the table based on the needs that we see arising for us. So, Donna's hands up.
Yeah, just one final thing, and this is with Jen. I'm sort of on the, it's the sort of chicken egg is whether a committee is first before an audit or not. In part because I think there are different ways we can approach the audit, given that we have a majority white population, and really sensitive that we could or make people feel tokenized. And there are different ways of doing the audit. And I don't know if this is where we would do the research and talk with different organizations before we commit to anything, but having some guidance from a group of people, figuring exactly not just what we want out of the audit, but what we think is a fair and something that we're comfortable with as well. So a straight up audit that could make people very identifiable, especially if this information is public. Is it going to be a public audit? Is it going to be an internal? Is it going to be private? Who's going to have access to it? Those are just questions that I'd want answered before I give all the information to somebody and say, come back with some data.
Right.
So I'd like some form of discussion, and maybe that's talking, just doing research and talking with different people, and as a board, pulling that together. I don't know, but I think there needs to be something before we just ship the info out to somebody and
Yeah,
say, set us back with the data.
Right.
So,
I think that's a good point. Okay. So it sounds like it's going to be some due diligence around what type of audit we want, who is available, who's providing the types of services we're looking for. And then we can sort of reconvene with an update on that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so it is 10:16, so we would need a vote to continue on with our agenda. We have a couple of hirings, public comment, and then the executive sessions. So Valley and Maddie, are you motioning and seconding the moving past 10, or do you have a comment? Thank you, Maddie.
Motioning.
Thank you. I gotta find my vote list. Okay, so I think we're up to Beth. You're first this time.
Yes.
Mara.
Sorry. Yes.
Thank you. I vote yes. Vali?
Yep.
Maddie?
Yes.
Kate?
No.
Jeremy?
Yes.
That was a begrudging yes from Jeremy. Kate? No, I already did Kate. Going the wrong way. Candy?
Yes.
Lindsay?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes, but only due to peer pressure.
Don't let us pressure you, Jen. Vote your heart. Susanna?
yes, but if it goes much past 11, I'm going to have to rethink that.
Okay, nope, fair enough. All right, so let's make sure we get through the hiring piece first.
Oh, you're waiting on me. Okay, so
I don't know who they are. You'll have to do that.
No, correct. And can we do it as a block of teachers so you don't have to go? That could save a little bit of time. Okay, so the first person that I'm recommending is Amy Nazaro as the 0.5 French teacher at Freeport High School. Amy received her bachelor's in French from UMO and her master's at Middlebury. She's currently teaching at Madomic Valley High. Previously, she taught at the Ashwood Waldorf School. She is a very impressive teacher, and her references spoke of her ability to build strong relationships with students and families. One of her references remarked, there are numerous students who go to her during unstructured times because they are comfortable in the space she provides. Amy is a gifted French teacher, a true team player, and a highly effective professional. So we're excited to have Amy join RSU 5. I also am happy to recommend Ross Shaler as the Latin teacher at Freeport High School. He graduated with the bachelor's from USM and received his master's from the University of Kansas. He's currently working at Winthrop High School as a Latin teacher. And I love this comment from one of his references. He is one of those teachers who is passionate, hardworking, engaging, and intelligent, and gets excited about sharing all of that with the students. He has a very special way of connecting with students. So we are happy to welcome Ross to RSU 5. And then lastly, I'm happy to recommend as the 0.5 English teacher at Freeport High School, Stu Palmer. He has a Bachelor of Arts from Bowdoin in English and a Master's from Bridgewater State College. He is currently working at Orono High School, but previously spent 2 years in Puerto Rico teaching and being an administrator. One of his references said, Stu has an amazing attitude and work ethic. He transformed the classroom into his own inviting learning space and provided high quality instruction from day one. Stu's classroom is one of actively engaged learning. And so we're also excited to have Stu join the FHS community.
Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the slate of educators? I just saw Maddie and Susanna up, and So we will vote these all together. And we'll start with Maura.
Yes.
I vote yes. Vali?
Yes.
Oh, did I hear a yes from her?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Maddie?
Yes, go Orno Red Riots.
Kate?
Yes, I knew Maddie would say that.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Candy?
Yes.
Lindsay?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Susanna?
Yes.
And Beth?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so 15, not sure if anybody hung in with us. Oh, we do still have a few folks on the call. Congratulations to all of you for hanging in there. So we are back to the second public comment on the agenda. Same process as the first time. If you had something to share, please raise your hand using the little hand at the bottom of your participants pane and let us know your name and where you're from. Okay. All right, so then I would take a motion for consideration and approval to enter into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA Section 4056D for the purpose of discussing the support staff negotiations for RSU 5. Maddie and Susanna, thank you. Oh, I'll start with myself. I'll vote yes. Vali?
Yes.
Thank you. Maddie?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Candy?
Yeah. Well, did you just call me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Susanna?
Yes.
And Beth?
Yes.
Okay,
Candy,
perfect. So we'll
yes.
enter into executive
And
session. Oh, did I
I
skip
also
someone?
vote yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Maura. I forgot to go back up to the second. Thank you. Jeez, this is what I get for going out of order. Thank you, Maura. All right, so we will enter into executive session. Thank you for all of the folks who tuned in this evening and participated in our meeting and listened in. We ask that you exit at this point for our executive session, and for the board members, just give us a couple minutes to clean up here in the library.